We've all heard of the seven wonders of the ancient world, the Great Pyramid of Giza, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, those legendary monuments that captured humanity's early ambition and imagination. But what if I told you that list barely scratches the surface, that beyond those famous landmarks lies an entire world of forgotten marvels, hidden in plain sight or buried by time, waiting to be rediscovered? These are structures so breathtaking, so advanced for their time, that they rival, and in some cases surpass, the wonders we thought we knew. This video isn't just about revisiting history, it's about rewriting it, uncovering 30 astonishing ancient wonders that have been overlooked for far too long. Picture this: sprawling cities carved into cliffsides, temples aligned with celestial events with impossible precision, underground labyrinths that defy explanation. These aren't myths or legends, they're real places, built by real people whose ingenuity and vision still echo across millennia. From the sunken ruins of lost civilizations to jaw-dropping feats of engineering that modern science still struggles to explain, each of these sites tells a story not just of kings and empires, but of everyday people who dared to dream big and leave their mark on the world. And that's what makes this journey so thrilling. It's a chance to see history not as a static list of facts, but as a living, breathing tapestry of human achievement. So if you've ever stood in awe of the pyramids or wondered what other marvels the ancient world held, you're in the right place. Over the next while, we're going to travel across continents and through time, exploring 30 forgotten wonders that deserve a spot in the history books. From South America to Southeast Asia, from deep beneath the ocean to high in the mountains, each of these sites will leave you questioning what you thought you knew about our past, and maybe even inspiring you to see the present a little differently. This is more than a history lesson. It's an invitation to wonder, to explore, and to remember that the world is still full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered. Let's begin. Our journey begins not in the deserts of Egypt or the jungles of Central America, but in the heart of southern Africa, with a wonder so monumental that for centuries, European explorers refused to believe it was built by Africans. This is the Great Zimbabwe, a sprawling stone city that stands as a powerful testament to a sophisticated and powerful civilization long before colonial powers ever set foot on the continent. Imagine a landscape of granite hills and savanna, and rising from it, immense curved walls towering over 30 feet high, constructed entirely without mortar. Each stone was perfectly carved and meticulously stacked, creating structures so stable and so precise they have endured for over 700 years. This was the heart of the Kingdom of Zimbabwe, built by the Shona people beginning in the 11th century. It was far more than just a collection of buildings. It was a thriving economic and political capital. At its peak, it was home to as many as 18,000 people. The city was divided into three main sections: the hill complex, believed to be a spiritual center; the valley ruins, a series of mud brick homes for the population; and most famously, the Great Enclosure. This colossal structure, with its iconic conical tower and its massive outer wall, contains enough stone to build a pyramid. Its purpose remains a subject of debate. Was it a royal residence, a sacred space for initiation ceremonies, or perhaps both? The sheer scale of labor and organization required to build it speaks to a highly centralized and powerful state. Great Zimbabwe's wealth and influence were built on trade. It sat at the nexus of a vast network that stretched from the gold-rich interior to the coast of the Indian Ocean. Archaeologists have found artifacts here from across the known world: Persian pottery, Chinese celadon dishes, and glass beads from India. This was a cosmopolitan center, a hub where African gold, ivory, and copper were exchanged for these luxury goods, making its rulers incredibly powerful and wealthy. The city was the engine of an empire, a beacon of African innovation and economic prowess. Yet, for all its grandeur, its story was almost stolen. When the first European colonists encountered these ruins in the late 19th century, their racist ideologies prevented them from accepting that a sub-Saharan African culture could have created something so advanced. They invented fantastical theories, attributing the construction to biblical figures like the Queen of Sheba or to Phoenician traders, anyone but the local African people whose ancestors still lived in the area. This deliberate erasure of history was an attempt to justify colonialism by denying the very existence of great African civilizations. It wasn't until the mid-20th century and after Zimbabwe's independence that archaeological evidence conclusively proved what was always true, that Great Zimbabwe was a magnificent and entirely African achievement. Recognizing this truth is the first step in appreciating its true wonder, not just as an architectural marvel, but as a symbol of cultural resilience and a reclaimed history. Now we travel from the African savanna to the most remote inhabited island on Earth, a tiny speck of land in the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. Here we find a mystery that has captivated the world for centuries, the silent, stoic moai of Easter Island, or as the indigenous people call it, Rapa Nui. Nearly 900 of these enormous stone figures dot the island's coastline, their backs to the sea, their hollow eyes forever watching over the land and its people. Carved from compressed volcanic ash, these statues are not just heads. Many are full-bodied figures buried up to their necks by centuries of soil shift, with the largest among them standing over 30 feet tall and weighing a staggering 82 tons. The creation process itself was a monumental feat of engineering and endurance. The Rapa Nui people quarried the stone from the volcanic crater of Rano Raraku, using hand-held basalt picks to painstakingly carve the moai directly from the rock face. You can still see hundreds of statues in various stages of completion within the quarry today, as if the workers simply walked away one day, providing a frozen snapshot of their ancient craft. But the real, enduring mystery has always been how they moved these multi-ton giants across miles of rugged terrain to their final ceremonial platforms called ahu. For a long time, popular theory suggested a slow, arduous process involving log rollers and ropes, a method that some have argued contributed to the island's deforestation. However, more recent experiments by archaeologists have proven a far more elegant and likely solution. The statues were walked. By using a system of ropes to rock the moai from side to side, teams could literally maneuver the giant figures upright in a shuffling motion across the landscape. This method, demonstrated successfully with a full-scale replica, aligns perfectly with local oral history which has always stated the statues walked to their places. But why? What was the purpose of dedicating such immense communal effort to these stone giants? The prevailing theory points to ancestor worship. Each moai is believed to represent a powerful lineage chief or important community figure. By carving and erecting these statues on a coastal ahu, the living community believed they could harness the spiritual energy or mana of the deceased ancestor who would then watch over and protect the village. Their placement was also deeply intentional, with many ahu and their moai positioned to align with astronomical events like the solstices or to mark territorial boundaries of different island clans. They were far more than art. They were a vital, functional part of the island's social and spiritual fabric, connecting the living to the dead and the land to the cosmos. This incredible cultural achievement, however, is shadowed by a tragic ecological parable. The same society that possessed the ingenuity to make statues walk eventually faced a devastating collapse. As the population grew, the demand for resources led to the clearing of the island's lush palm forests, likely to open land for agriculture and to provide logs for transportation and construction. Without trees, the soil eroded, crop yields fell, and the islanders could no longer build the seafaring canoes necessary for fishing deep waters or trading. The result was famine, social unrest, and a dramatic population decline. In this period of crisis, the old ways were overturned. the construction of moai ceased and many statues were deliberately toppled during violent clan wars. The focus of spiritual life shifted from the ancestor moai to the Birdman cult, a competition centered on the nearby islet of Motu Nui. The story of the Rapa Nui is a powerful and sobering reminder of the delicate balance between human ambition and the environment, a lesson etched in stone that resonates profoundly today. From the remote isolation of the Pacific, we now turn our attention inward to a site of such immense scale and ambition that it redefined what an ancient wonder could be. Buried in the Chinese countryside for over 2,000 years, this next marvel wasn't a palace or a temple, but an entire subterranean army waiting in perfect formation for a command that would never come. This is the Terracotta army of Emperor Qin Shi Huang, a discovery so staggering it continues to rewrite our understanding of ancient China. The story of its modern discovery sounds like something out of a film. In March 1974, a group of farmers were digging a well near the city of Xi'an when their shovels struck something hard, not rock, but the fired clay shoulder of a life-sized soldier. Archaeologists were called in, and what they began to unearth would send shockwaves through the historical community. They hadn't found a simple statue, they had found Pit 1, an enormous underground vault measuring over 7,000 square meters, containing an estimated 6,000 soldiers arranged in precise military formation. This was just the beginning. Subsequent excavations revealed two more major pits housing cavalry units, chariots, and high-ranking officers, along with a fourth pit that was left empty, perhaps unfinished at the time of the emperor's death. It was a complete military command frozen in time. But the true wonder isn't just the sheer number of statues, it's their breathtaking individuality. This isn't an army of clones. Each soldier was crafted with distinct facial features, expressions, and hairstyles. Some appear young and eager, others old and weathered with the wisdom of countless campaigns. Their armor and uniforms are meticulously detailed, indicating different ranks and military specializations from infantrymen and archers to charioteers and cavalry. Archaeologists believe the artisans worked from live models, ensuring no two faces were exactly alike, creating a perpetual garrison of unique individuals. The figures were also originally painted in vibrant, lifelike colors, making the silent ranks a brilliantly polychrome force, though much of this paint has flaked away upon exposure to air, presenting one of the greatest conservation challenges at the site today. To understand why this army was built, we must understand the man it was meant to protect. Qin Shi Huang was the first emperor of a unified China, a brutal, brilliant, and relentlessly ambitious ruler. He conquered the 6 other warring states, standardizing everything from currency and writing to the axle width of carts, forging a single Chinese identity out of centuries of conflict. He was also profoundly obsessed with immortality and the afterlife. Having wielded absolute power in life, he was determined to command it in death. The Terracotta army was his plan for eternal security, a force to defend him against any spiritual threats in the next world. They stand guard east of his tomb, the direction from which he had conquered his rivals, forever on alert. And what of his tomb itself? According to the ancient historian Sima Qian, the emperor's main burial mound, which remains largely unexcavated, contains an entire underground universe. It's said to feature miniature rivers of flowing mercury representing the great rivers of China, a ceiling inlaid with pearls to simulate the stars, and booby traps set to kill any intruders. Modern scientific surveys have indeed detected unusually high concentrations of mercury in the soil around the mound, lending startling credibility to these 2,000-year-old accounts. The thought of what else might lie undisturbed beneath that hill is what fuels ongoing archaeology and captures the world's imagination. The Terracotta army is more than a collection of sculptures. It is a powerful statement of one man's ego, a snapshot of ancient military technology, and an enduring, silent testament to the human cost of building an empire. Just when we think we have the story of human civilization neatly mapped out, archaeology delivers a staggering surprise that forces us to rewrite the entire narrative. This brings us to our fourth wonder, a site so revolutionary that it single-handedly dismantles one of history's most fundamental beliefs, that agriculture came first and then complex society followed. Nestled on a barren hilltop in southeastern Turkey, Göbekli Tepe is a place that shouldn't exist, dating back an almost incomprehensible 11,600 years. This sprawling complex of stone rings and towering pillars predates Stonehenge by 6 millennia and the Great Pyramid by a staggering 7,000 years. It was built by hunter-gatherers, a people we have always pictured as nomadic bands, constantly on the move for survival. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe turns that image on its head, suggesting that it may have been the human impulse to worship and gather for ritual that actually inspired us to settle down and invent farming. The scale of construction here is mind-boggling. Imagine circles of massive T-shaped limestone pillars, each one weighing many tons, arranged in great rings. The largest of these pillars soars 18 feet into the air and is estimated to weigh between 15 and 20 tons. Quarrying, carving, and transporting these monoliths would have required a level of organization, planning, and skilled labor that scholars never dreamed possible for a pre-agrarian society. This was not the work of a small, scattered family group. It was a communal project on a colossal scale, implying a sophisticated social structure with leaders, artisans, and a large, coordinated workforce, all sustained without farms or permanent villages. The logistics are a mystery that continues to baffle researchers. How did they feed hundreds of workers without cultivated crops? The current theory suggests they were sustained by wild resources, perhaps including the processing of wild cereals into beer or gruel as a kind of ritual food for the builders, a practice that might have planted the very seed for domestication. But the wonder doesn't stop with the sheer size of the pillars. It's etched into their very surface. These are not plain stone blocks. They are covered in a breathtaking menagerie of carved reliefs. A chaotic and vibrant world of animals comes to life in the stone. Foxes, snakes, boars, cranes, gazelles, and ferocious predators like lions. These aren't peaceful pastoral scenes. Many depict violent interactions, with vultures swooping down on headless human figures and a chilling depiction of a scorpion attacking a man. The meaning of these carvings is lost to time, but they are clearly not mere decoration. They likely represent a complex spiritual worldview, a system of totems and myths central to the beliefs of the people who gathered here. The site was not a village. No evidence of daily domestic life has been found. It was a purely ritual space, a cathedral from the dawn of time, serving a vast region where nomadic groups would periodically converge for shared ceremonies. Perhaps most astonishing of all is what happened to Göbekli Tepe after it served its purpose. Around 8000 BC, after more than 1,000 years of use, this incredible site was not destroyed in a war or abandoned due to famine. It was deliberately and carefully buried by its own people. Every circle, every pillar, every carving was filled in with tons of earth and stone, preserving it perfectly for millennia until its rediscovery. Why would a culture go to such immense effort to build something so magnificent, only to consign it to an intentional tomb? We may never know the exact reason, but it suggests a profound and deliberate closing of a sacred chapter, a ritual entombment to protect or retire the power of the place. This act of burial is what saved Göbekli Tepe for us, allowing it to emerge from the sand and rock thousands of years later to challenge everything we thought we knew. It stands as a powerful testament to the spiritual and artistic drive of early humanity, proving that the desire to create meaning and come together for something greater than ourselves is one of the most fundamental and ancient human wonders of all. Leaving behind the ancient stone circles of Göbekli Tepe, we now journey to a completely different landscape, one where the canvas is not rock but the very earth itself. Imagine a vast, windswept desert plateau in Peru, a place where the only features for miles are the subtle ripples of sand and stone. Yet from this seemingly barren ground, a secret art emerges, one so enormous it can only be truly comprehended from the heavens. This is the realm of the Nazca lines, a gallery of giants etched into the Pampa, Colorado over 2,000 years ago, creating one of archaeology's most captivating and enduring puzzles. The sheer scale of these geoglyphs is almost impossible to grasp from the ground. From an earthly perspective, you might see little more than a faint trail or a shallow groove in the reddish-brown desert floor. It is only from the air that the true masterpieces reveal themselves. Scattered across nearly 200 square miles are hundreds of individual designs. Some are clean, precise geometric shapes, immense triangles, trapezoids, and spirals that stretch for miles. Others are breathtakingly intricate biomorphic figures. A hummingbird with wings outstretched, a massive monkey with an intricately coiled tail, a spider, a killer whale, and even a seemingly smiling human figure nicknamed the astronaut. The largest of these figures, the pelican, spans nearly 900 feet, while a single straight line runs for an unbelievable 30 miles across the desert. The precision is staggering, the lines are near perfectly straight, and the curves of the animal figures are smooth and confident, executed with a clarity that defies their monumental size. The method of their creation is a testament to the Nazca people's ingenious understanding of their environment. They didn't build these lines up with materials, they carved them down. The desert surface here is covered in a layer of dark, oxidized stones and pebbles. Beneath this lies a lighter-colored, sandy soil. The Nazca artists simply removed the top layer of dark stones along the predetermined paths of their designs, exposing the bright subsoil beneath. This created a striking contrast that made the lines visible. The arid, windless, and stable climate of the region has acted as a perfect preservative, preventing the lines from being eroded or overgrown for centuries. The real question isn't so much how they physically did it. The technique is straightforward, but how they managed to plot and execute such massive, perfectly proportioned designs without any ability to fly. The prevailing theory suggests they used a system of scaling up small-scale models using a simple grid system and stakes with ropes to mark out the lines, a remarkable feat of pre-Columbian engineering and mathematics. But the why remains the greatest mystery, fueling speculation and debate for decades. The most famous and romantic theory, proposed by author Erich von Däniken in the 1960s, suggested the lines were landing strips or signals for ancient astronauts. While this captured the public's imagination, it has been widely dismissed by archaeologists for its lack of evidence and its disregard for the capabilities of the Nazca culture. A more grounded theory posits that the lines were a giant astronomical calendar, with certain shapes aligning with celestial events like the solstices or the rising of important stars. This is plausible as many ancient cultures tracked the heavens, but it doesn't fully explain the purpose of the animal and plant figures. The most widely accepted explanation among scholars today is that the lines were sacred pathways, integral to rituals involving water and fertility. For the Nazca, living in one of the driest places on Earth, water was the most precious and divine resource. The geoglyphs may have served as a way to communicate with the gods, perhaps as processional routes where people would walk to plead for life-giving rain. Some researchers have noted that many of the lines lead to sources of water, and the animal figures, like the hummingbird, monkey, and whale, are all creatures associated with water in Nazca mythology. The act of walking these pathways, or even the very act of creating them, could have been a form of worship, a desperate and beautiful attempt to bring order and prayer to an unpredictable and arid world. From our modern vantage point, we see art, but for the Nazca, these lines were likely a profound and vital dialogue with the gods, a massive, enduring prayer for survival written across the skin of the desert itself. But the Nabateans' greatest achievement wasn't carved in stone, it was channeled in water. To sustain a metropolis of perhaps 20,000 people in the heart of a desert, they engineered a water management system of breathtaking sophistication. They constructed a vast network of dams, cisterns, and ceramic pipes to capture, control, and conserve every precious drop of rainwater that fell during the brief, violent flash floods. They carved channels into the cliff faces to divert water away from the main thoroughfare and into massive underground reservoirs. This hydrological mastery transformed a barren canyon into a lush, habitable oasis, allowing gardens to flourish and providing public fountains for its citizens. Their control over water was the true source of their wealth and power, turning Petra into a mandatory stop for thirsty caravans and granting the Nabateans the ability to tax every traveler who needed to refill their water skins. This strategic control over trade routes made Petra unimaginably wealthy. It sat at the crossroads of the incense trade, where routes from Arabia, Africa, India, and the Mediterranean converged. Camel caravans, sometimes thousands of animals long, would arrive laden with frankincense, myrrh, spices, silks, and ivory. The Nabateans didn't just tax these goods, they provided protection, supplies, and a secure market for exchange. This constant flow of people and ideas made Petra a cosmopolitan melting pot, a place where Egyptian, Greek, Mesopotamian, and local Arab cultures blended, and this fusion is vividly reflected in its architecture. The famous treasury facade, with its ornate Hellenistic urns and friezes standing beside Egyptian-style eagles and Nabatean gods, is a stone testament to this global influence. For centuries, Petra thrived as the capital of a powerful kingdom, but its fate was tied to the shifting currents of trade. The rise of maritime routes under the Roman Empire slowly drained the land-based incense roads of their importance. A devastating earthquake in the year 363 CE shattered the city's infrastructure, and it gradually faded from memory in the West, its existence fading into little more than a beautiful rumor. It was rediscovered for the Western world in 1812 by the Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, who, hearing tales of a lost city, disguised himself as an Arab scholar to gain access to the region. When he stepped through the sick and saw the treasury glowing in the sun, he brought one of the world's most spectacular wonders back into the light, a hidden city of stone that continues to whisper the secrets of the desert. After the hidden rock-cut city of Petra, we turn to a wonder that celebrated the very opposite of secrecy, the open and glorious pursuit of knowledge. In the heart of the ancient metropolis of Ephesus, a city already famed for the Temple of Artemis, stood a building that was both a monumental library and a grand tomb, a breathtaking fusion of intellectual ambition and personal legacy. This is the Library of Celsus, a structure whose elegant two-story facade, meticulously reconstructed, remains one of the most iconic and photographed images of the classical world, a symbol of Rome's reverence for learning and power. Commissioned in the early 2nd century CE by the son of a Roman senator, the library was far more than a repository for books. It was a heroic monument or heroine, built to honor Tiberius Julius Celsus Pulminus, who had served as the Roman governor of the Asian province and was remarkably buried within its walls. This combination of library and tomb was highly unusual. Roman law typically forbade burials within the city limits. The fact that Celsus was granted this honor speaks volumes about his immense status and the special permission he must have received. The building was both his final resting place and his eternal reputation, a physical assertion that his wisdom and virtue would endure long after his death, literally surrounded by the knowledge he valued. And what a surrounding it was! The library's collection was staggering for its time, housing an estimated 12,000 scrolls. This made it the third largest library in the ancient world, surpassed only by the legendary libraries of Alexandria and Pergamum. These scrolls, made of papyrus, were stored in niches within the inner walls, protected from the damaging humidity of the Aegean climate by a clever architectural feature. a 1-meter gap between the inner and outer walls, creating a buffer zone that helped regulate temperature and moisture. This careful design shows a profound understanding of preservation, ensuring that the wisdom contained within these texts would be safeguarded for future generations. But the true magic of the Library of Celsus is expressed on its facade, a masterpiece of Roman architectural propaganda. The front is designed to look larger than it actually is, with the central columns on the lower level being taller than those at the ends, creating an elegant optical illusion of greater height and grandeur. Between the columns, 4 female statues stand in niches, each one representing a cardinal virtue of Celsus himself. These are not mere decorations, they are a silent biography in marble. Sophia represents wisdom, Arete symbolizes virtue, Enoia embodies intelligence, and Episteme stands for knowledge. Together, they present a perfect portrait of the ideal Roman statesman, wise, virtuous, intelligent, and knowledgeable. It was a powerful message to every citizen of Ephesus and every visitor who approached, declaring that the man entombed within was the embodiment of these ideals and that the pursuit of such virtues was the highest civic calling. Tragically, this temple of knowledge met a fiery end. Sometime in the 3rd century CE, either from an earthquake or a devastating fire, the library's interior was utterly destroyed, consuming the priceless scrolls within. The magnificent facade eventually crumbled into ruins, and for centuries its stones lay scattered, a forgotten puzzle box of a lost civilization. Its modern rebirth is a wonder in its own right. Between 1970 and 78, a massive archaeological effort undertaken by a German team meticulously reconstructed the frontage using about 85% of the original fragments. This painstaking anastylosis allowed the library to once again stand in splendor, not as a modern replica, but as the original structure resurrected. Today, it doesn't house scrolls, but it continues to serve its original purpose, to astonish, to inspire, and to remind us of the timeless human desire to preserve knowledge, honor legacy, and build monuments to the ideas that define a civilization. It stands as a poignant and beautiful ruin, a testament to the fact that while fire can destroy paper and time can topple stone, the aspiration for wisdom is itself an indestructible wonder. Leaving behind the reconstructed marble of the Roman world, we now venture into a hidden gorge in India, where an entire university of faith and art was carved directly into the face of a towering horseshoe-shaped cliff. This is the Ajanta Caves, a sequence of 30 rock-cut sanctuaries that represent one of the most magnificent and well-preserved collections of ancient Buddhist art anywhere on the planet. Unlike the grand facades of Petra, the wonder of Ajanta lies within, a profound spiritual journey into mountainsides transformed into elaborately painted temples and quiet monastic chambers. The creation of this sacred complex unfolded in 2 distinct bursts of fervent activity, separated by a long silence of centuries. The earliest caves, numbered 9, 10, 12, and 13, were excavated by monks under the patronage of the Satavahana dynasty around the 2nd century before the Common Era. These were simple, austere prayer halls known as chaityagrihas, focusing on congregational worship. Then, after a lapse of nearly 400 years, a second and far more prolific phase began under the powerful Vakataka dynasty, particularly during the reign of Emperor Harisena. From the 5th century into the early 6th century Common Era, artisans returned to the site with renewed ambition, carving out stunning viharas or monastic residences, and even more elaborate chaityas, adorning them with sculptures and most famously with paintings of unparalleled beauty and narrative power. To step inside one of these caves is to enter a different world. The walls and ceilings are not merely decorated, they are alive with stories. The paintings at Ajanta are the finest surviving examples of ancient Indian art, and their sophistication is breathtaking. The artists employed a tempera technique, applying pigments mixed with a binding agent onto a dry plaster surface. They worked with a stunning palette derived from minerals and plants, lapis lazuli blue from Afghanistan, vibrant yellow ochre, rich reds and greens. But the true genius lies in their execution. The figures are rendered with a profound understanding of volume, form, and emotion. They possess a graceful, three-dimensional quality, with masterful shading that gives the impression of light emanating from within the paintings themselves. The artists captured every nuance of human expression, the serene compassion of a bodhisattva, the playful energy of celestial nymphs known as apsaras, the tender love of a mother, or the grim determination of a warrior. These murals are not random decorations, they are a vast visual scripture. Their primary purpose was to illustrate the Jataka tales, the stories of the Buddha's previous lives before his enlightenment, where he manifested as everything from a noble king and a wise merchant to a self-sacrificing rabbit or a majestic elephant. Each tale is a parable about compassion, generosity, and morality, serving as both instruction and inspiration for the monks who lived and meditated in these caves. Alongside these past lives, the artists also depicted key events from the historical Buddha's life, from his birth to his enlightenment and his first sermon. For a largely illiterate population of monks and pilgrims, these vibrant visual narratives were the primary method of teaching the complex philosophies of Buddhism, making the caves a massive, immersive picture book of faith. The caves themselves are architectural marvels. The Chaitya halls are dominated by a central stupa, a symbolic representation of the Buddha around which monks would circumambulate in meditation. These halls are supported by rows of intricately carved pillars and feature a grand horseshoe-shaped window above the entrance, flooding the interior with a soft, diffused light that would have illuminated the sacred sculptures and paintings. The viharas, or monastery caves, are multi-storied complexes with small, simple cells for the monks to sleep and meditate, opening onto a central courtyard often featuring a shrine with a magnificent sculpture of the Buddha. The level of planning required to carve these spaces from the top down, ensuring structural integrity and perfect proportions, all with simple hand tools, is a staggering feat of engineering. And then, this luminous world of color and devotion simply vanished, sometime around the 7th century Common Era, as Buddhism declined in the region in favor of a resurgent Hinduism. The monks gradually abandoned Ajanta. The jungle quickly moved in, with vines and vegetation concealing the cave entrances. The torrential monsoon rains and the silt they carried built up over the entrance, sealing the caves like a time capsule. For over 1,000 years, this masterpiece of human creativity was lost, known only through local legend. Its rediscovery in 1819 reads like an adventure novel. A British officer named John Smith, out on a hunting expedition for a tiger, was tracking his prey through the rugged terrain of the Deccan Plateau. His path was blocked by the thick undergrowth along the Waghora River. As he and his men cut their way through, they stumbled upon the arch of Cave 10. Captain Smith, curious, squeezed inside and raised his torch, illuminating paintings that had not been seen by human eyes for 12 centuries. He even carved his name and the date onto a bodhisattva statue, a now regrettable act of vandalism that nonetheless marks the precise moment this wonder was returned to the world. The Ajanta caves stand as a silent, powerful testament to the heights of human devotion and artistic genius, a hidden library of color and faith patiently waiting in the dark to share its light once more. Descending next into the very bedrock of the Mediterranean, we find a wonder that challenges our perception of Neolithic society not by its height but by its profound depth. Hidden beneath the quiet streets of the town of Paula on the island of Malta lies the Hal-Saflieni Hypogeum, a labyrinthine underground sanctuary carved with nothing but stone tools and antler picks over 5,000 years ago. This is not a cave adapted for use. This is an entire architectural complex, a multi-level temple of death and ritual, meticulously excavated from the solid Globigerina limestone, mirroring the freestanding megalithic temples that dot the Maltese islands above ground. It is a monument of inversion, a sacred world built entirely below the surface, representing one of the most sophisticated and spiritually charged achievements of the prehistoric world. The sheer scale of the Hypogeum's excavation is difficult to comprehend. The complex is structured across 3 distinct levels that delve deeper into the earth, each serving a different purpose and each more awe-inspiring than the last. The upper level, closest to the surface, is the oldest section, with its origins dating back to around 4000 before the Common Era. It initially began as a natural cave that was expanded, featuring several large burial chambers. The middle level, carved later, is the heart of the Hypogeum's architectural brilliance. Here, we find features that are direct, subterranean copies of the above-ground temples. Doorways and windows framed by massive stone blocks, corbelled ceilings that imitate the curved roofs of built structures, and walls finished with a smooth, almost modern-looking render of red ochre. The deepest layer, the lower level, is the most austere and inaccessible, a barren chamber that likely served as a storage space for grain or sacred offerings, far removed from the world of the living above. Within this shadowy realm, one chamber stands out for its otherworldly and inexplicable property. This is the so-called Oracle Room, a small, circular cell in the middle level. Its ceiling and walls are painted with elegant spiral motifs in red ochre, but its true marvel is not visual, it is auditory. The room possesses a powerful and precise acoustic resonance. A deep male voice speaking or chanting at a specific pitch within this chamber creates a haunting, mesmerizing effect. The sound resonates and amplifies, vibrating through the very stone and echoing throughout the entire labyrinthine complex. This is not a vague echo, it is a sustained, pervasive hum that feels both physical and spiritual, a vibration that can be felt in the bones as much as heard by the ears. The architects of the Hypogeum somehow engineered this phenomenon, shaping the rock to create this specific sonic effect. The purpose seems clear: to create an awe-inspiring experience during rituals. A priest or shaman speaking from this room could have his voice transformed into what seemed like the disembodied voice of an earth goddess or an ancestral spirit, addressing the congregation gathered in the halls outside. It is one of the earliest and most compelling examples of architecture being used to manipulate human perception for a spiritual end, a Stone Age sound system designed to bridge the gap between the living and the divine. This profound connection to the afterlife is underscored by the Hypogeum's primary function as a collective burial site. When it was first systematically excavated in the early 20th century, the discovery was both breathtaking and macabre. The chambers and niches of the complex were found to contain the mingled remains of an estimated 7,000 individuals. This was not a tomb for a privileged few. It was a community ossuary where, over many centuries, the dead were deposited, often after their bodies had been defleshed elsewhere in a practice known as excarnation. Their bones were then gathered and added to the collective ancestors, creating a vast physical tapestry of the community's lineage stored deep within the earth. This practice suggests a complex belief system centered on veneration of ancestors and cyclical rebirth, where the boundary between the living and the dead was porous and continuously negotiated. Amidst these thousands of bones, a more peculiar and controversial discovery was made: a number of skulls that exhibited a strange, elongated shape. These were not the result of the common practice of cradleboarding in infancy, which can produce a flattening of the back of the skull. These skulls appeared to be naturally elongated with a pronounced dolichocephalic form. Their discovery has, unsurprisingly, fueled speculation about everything from an unknown, advanced ancient race to extraterrestrial visitors. A more grounded, though no less fascinating, explanation lies in the realm of cultural identity. In many ancient societies, head shaping through binding in infancy was a deliberate practice used to denote status, nobility, or membership in a specific priestly class. The individuals with these modified skulls may have been part of an elite group of ritual specialists who oversaw the complex ceremonies within the Hypogeum, their physical distinction marking them as intermediaries between the world of the living community and the realm of the 7,000 ancestors sleeping in the dark below. The Hypogeum of Hal Saflieni remains a deeply mysterious place, a silent, echoing underworld that speaks volumes about the spiritual sophistication, architectural genius, and complex funerary practices of a people who, 5 millennia ago, chose to build their most impressive temple not to reach for the sky but to commune with the earth itself. Now we travel from the echoing chambers of Malta to the high plateau of central Mexico, to a city so vast and so brilliantly planned it feels like it was laid out by gods. This is Teotihuacan, the city of the gods, or in the Nahuatl language, the place where men become gods. Long before the Aztecs discovered its awe-inspiring ruins and gave it that name, this was the first great metropolis of the Americas, a powerhouse of culture, commerce, and spiritual power that dominated the region for centuries. At its peak around 450 Common Era, it was one of the largest cities on Earth, home to over 100,000 people, a bustling, multi-ethnic hub whose influence stretched from the arid northern deserts to the lush jungles of the Maya. Yet for all its grandeur and undeniable power, Teotihuacan holds onto one of history's most tantalizing secrets. We have no idea who ruled it. The city's breathtaking scale and order are immediately apparent from the moment you walk its central artery, the Mkayotli, known today as the Avenue of the Dead. This is not a simple path. It is a 40-meter-wide ceremonial causeway that runs for over 2.5 kilometers through the heart of the city, perfectly aligned 15.5 degrees east of true north. The Aztecs gave it its evocative name because the massive, rubble-filled platforms lining its sides looked to them like burial mounds, the tombs of ancient giants. Walking this avenue with the colossal pyramids looming ahead, you feel a sense of deliberate, awe-inspiring intention. This was not a city that grew organically. It was a master-planned utopia, a meticulously engineered testament to a collective vision executed on an almost unimaginable scale. Dominating the skyline are the two great pyramids that anchor the avenue. To the north stands the Pyramid of the Moon, elegantly framing the sacred Cerro Gordo mountain behind it and marking the ceremonial endpoint of the Avenue of the Dead. But it is the structure to the east that truly stuns the senses, the Pyramid of the Sun. This is one of the largest pyramids ever built, a behemoth constructed over a natural cave and a lava tube, which the Teotihuacanos likely believed was a portal to the underworld. Its base is nearly as wide as that of the Great Pyramid of Giza, and climbing its 248 steps to the summit is a physical ordeal that rewards you with a breathtaking view of the entire valley, a powerful reminder of the city's total dominion over the landscape. The precision of its construction is a marvel. Its west face aligns perfectly with the setting sun on specific dates, tying the city's very fabric to the cycles of the cosmos. The true genius of Teotihuacan, however, lies not in its monumental architecture but in its revolutionary urban planning. This was a city designed for living, and its layout reveals a society obsessed with order and equality. The city was divided into a precise grid of neighborhoods or barrios, each with its own temples, markets, and public spaces. But the most astonishing discovery has been the residential compounds. Unlike most ancient cities which had vast slums surrounding a wealthy royal center, Teotihuacan's housing was remarkably egalitarian. The majority of its citizens, from artisans to merchants, lived in beautifully constructed apartment complexes built around central courtyards. These were not hovels, they were spacious, stuccoed homes with efficient drainage systems, courtyards for collecting rainwater, and even separate rooms for sleeping, cooking, and ritual. The walls of many were adorned with vibrant murals depicting gods, goddesses, and scenes of paradise, art that was accessible to the common citizen, not just an elite few. This suggests a quality of life and a degree of social organization that was unprecedented in the ancient world. And this brings us to the central, haunting mystery of Teotihuacan. Who was in charge? In every other contemporary civilization, the Maya with their divine kings, the Zapotecs with their rulers buried at Monte Albon, we find clear evidence of a ruling elite. Grand palaces, opulent tombs filled with jade and treasure, and inscriptions glorifying individual leaders. At Teotihuacan, we find none of that. There is no grand royal palace. The few tombs we have discovered are modest communal affairs. There are no stone stelae carved with the portraits and names of boastful kings. The art is curiously impersonal, focusing on abstract spiritual forces and nature deities like the storm god and the great goddess rather than deified rulers. This has led archaeologists to propose a radical theory that Teotihuacan may have been governed by a collective, perhaps a council of elder priests or a coalition of powerful merchant guilds, rather than a single all-powerful dictator. It may have been one of history's first large-scale experiments in collective rule, a complex society that managed to thrive for centuries without the cult of a singular personality. This makes its eventual collapse all the more perplexing. Around the year 550 Common Era, something catastrophic happened. The city did not slowly decline, it was violently and deliberately destroyed. Evidence points to a massive, coordinated uprising from within. The major temples and civic structures along the Avenue of the Dead were systematically burned and desecrated. Sculptures were smashed and the revered murals were defaced. This was not an invasion by a foreign army. It was a revolution, a calculated act of iconoclasm where the people themselves tore down the symbols of their own power and belief. The cause remains hidden. Perhaps generations of a rigid, theocratic system finally bred resentment. Maybe a prolonged drought led to famine and social unrest, shattering the communal spirit. Or possibly, the very absence of a strong central ruler made the city vulnerable to internal factionalism that spiraled out of control. Whatever the reason, the result was absolute. The heart of the city was ritually killed and its population scattered. By the time the Aztecs wandered into the valley centuries later, they found only a ghostly, magnificent shell, a place so grand they could only assume it was built by giants and abandoned by gods. Teotihuacan stands as a silent, monumental question mark, a testament to the fact that a society can achieve breathtaking heights of collective organization and artistic splendor, and still carry within it the seeds of its own mysterious undoing. From the silent, enigmatic ruins of Teotihuacan, we turn our attention to a wonder that may never have been built at all, a legend so persistent it has captivated historians and dreamers for millennia. This is the story of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, a verdant, multi-tiered paradise said to have been built by a lovesick king for his homesick queen, a miraculous feat of engineering in the heart of the Mesopotamian desert. But here lies the greatest twist in its tale. Despite its fame as one of the canonical 7 wonders of the ancient world, we have absolutely no physical proof it ever existed in Babylon. This creates a fascinating archaeological detective story, a 2,000-year-old cold case that pits compelling ancient accounts against a complete lack of material evidence. Our primary sources for the gardens are a handful of classical writers who described them centuries after they were supposedly built. The most detailed account comes from the 1st century BCE historian Berossus, a Babylonian priest who wrote in Greek. He claimed the gardens were constructed by the great king Nebuchadnezzar II around 600 BCE to please his Median wife Amytis, who missed the green, mountainous landscape of her homeland. Later Greek and Roman historians, including Strabo and Diodorus Siculus, elaborated on this description. They painted a picture of a breathtaking artificial mountain, a ziggurat-like structure of vaulted terraces built from stone, a rare and valuable building material in mud brick Mesopotamia. These terraces were said to rise up to 75 feet high, supported by massive stone columns. The most incredible detail was the sophisticated irrigation system required to sustain this aerial Eden. Ancient texts describe a complex mechanism of screws, pumps, and cisterns, likely a series of Archimedes screws, lifting water from the Euphrates River all the way to the highest terrace to feed a lush collection of trees, vines, and flowers from across the empire. These vivid descriptions are powerful and alluring, yet they present the first major problem. None of the contemporary Babylonian records, the thousands of cuneiform tablets that meticulously document Nebuchadnezzar's reign, his building projects, his palaces, and even the names of his wives, ever mention these spectacular gardens. For a king who was famously boastful about his architectural achievements, this is a deafening silence. If he had built something so revolutionary and wondrous, wouldn't he have proclaimed it far and wide? This discrepancy has led many archaeologists to question the entire story, suggesting the gardens may be a romanticized amalgamation of other, real gardens from across the region, a tale that grew in the telling as it passed from Mesopotamian sources into Greek folklore. The search for physical proof in Babylon itself has proven equally frustrating. For over a century, archaeologists have excavated the site of the ancient city, located near modern-day Hilla in Iraq. They have unearthed the foundations of Nebuchadnezzar's immense palace, traced the outlines of the city walls, and even found evidence of the famous Ishtar Gate. But no structure has been found that matches the description of the Hanging Gardens. The soil in the region is dry and alkaline, excellent for preserving mud brick, but no trace of the extensive stone foundations or the complex hydraulic system described by the Greeks has ever been identified. Some researchers have pointed to a series of unusual vaulted basements with well-like structures near the palace, proposed in the early 20th century by German archaeologist Robert Koldewey as a potential site. However, this theory is widely disputed as the location doesn't align well with the classical descriptions and the evidence for massive irrigation is thin at best. The harsh reality is that in the very city where the gardens were supposedly the most stunning sight, there is not a single piece of incontrovertible archaeological evidence to confirm they were ever there. This complete lack of evidence in Babylon has fueled an intriguing alternative theory that the classical writers, and perhaps even Berossus himself, simply got the location wrong. What if the Hanging Gardens were real, but they weren't in Babylon at all? The most compelling alternative candidate is Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrian Empire conquered by the Babylonians. Here, archaeologists have found something remarkable. In the palace of the Assyrian king Sennacherib, who ruled a century before Nebuchadnezzar, royal inscriptions describe a breathtaking palace without a rival. Most fascinatingly, these texts boast of a wonder for all peoples, describing a massive irrigation system involving an enormous water-raising screw made of bronze, the earliest known example of such technology, that brought water from miles away to feed his royal garden. Even more convincing, a huge stone aqueduct and canal system built by Sennacherib called Jerwan still stands today as a testament to his hydrological ambition. His grandson, Ashurbanipal, even had carvings made showing his lush palace garden, with trees and vines growing on terraced levels. The pieces of the puzzle fit together almost perfectly: a powerful king, advanced irrigation technology, and terraced gardens, all in Nineveh. It is entirely possible that over centuries, the memory of Assyrian greatness was absorbed into the legend of Babylonian glory, and the location of this incredible garden was shifted to the more famous city. Yet there remains a third, more philosophical possibility, that the Hanging Gardens of Babylon are a work of pure mythology, an idealized vision of the ultimate Oriental paradise. To the Greeks and Romans, the East was a land of immense wealth and impossible marvels. The idea of a king building a mountain of greenery in the desert for love appealed to their sense of romance and the exotic. The garden itself fits into a broader literary tradition of wondrous green spaces, from the Epic of Gilgamesh to the Garden of Eden. It represents humanity's eternal desire to conquer nature, to create beauty and order out of a harsh wilderness, and the limitless power of a monarch to make his every whim a reality. In this sense, the Hanging Gardens are no less real for being fictional. They became a powerful cultural archetype, a symbol of ultimate luxury and engineering prowess that has inspired artists, writers, and architects for 2,000 years. So, were the Hanging Gardens of Babylon a historical reality, a case of mistaken identity, or a beautiful lie? The answer remains one of history's most enchanting mysteries. The lack of evidence in Babylon is undeniable, yet the detailed descriptions from ancient sources are too specific to be entirely dismissed. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in the middle, a real, magnificent garden in Nineveh that, through centuries of storytelling and the fog of war, had its legend transferred to its great rival. Or perhaps it is a story that doesn't need a physical location to hold its power, a testament to the human imagination's ability to build wonders even grander than those made of stone and earth. After exploring grand cities and legendary gardens, we now turn to a wonder that could be held in your hands, yet contains a complexity that dwarfs many of the massive structures we've discussed. Recovered from the depths of the sea, this isn't a monument to a god or a king, but a testament to the incredible power of the human mind. This is the Antikythera Mechanism, an ancient Greek device so advanced that its discovery forced us to completely rewrite our understanding of ancient technology. Found in a shipwreck off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera in 1901, it appeared to be little more than a heavily corroded lump of bronze and wood. It wasn't until decades later, as archaeologists painstakingly cleaned and examined it, that they realized they were looking at the fragmented remains of the world's first known analog computer. The true wonder of this device is revealed in its intricate interior, a clockwork universe of precision gears. Through painstaking analysis using advanced imaging techniques like X-ray tomography, scientists have been able to peer inside the corroded fragments and map out a system of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears, each carefully cut by hand. These gears work together with a sophistication that would not be seen again in clockwork mechanisms until the cathedrals of Europe in the 14th century, a staggering gap of over 1,000 years. The main driving gear would have been turned by a hand crank, setting the entire complex system in motion. This wasn't just a simple calendar, it was a mechanical symphony designed to model the irregular motions of the heavens with breathtaking accuracy. So what did this ancient computer do? The Antikythera Mechanism was a portable planetarium, an astronomical prediction machine of immense power. By turning the crank, an operator could calculate the positions of the sun, moon, and likely the 5 known planets relative to the zodiac. It could predict lunar and solar eclipses decades in advance, not just telling you when one would occur, but the time, the type of eclipse, and even the color it might appear in the sky. Information steeped in both scientific and astrological significance. One of its most beautiful functions was tracking the 4-year cycle of the ancient Panhellenic Games, including the original Olympics, making it both a scientific instrument and a cultural calendar. The front dial featured a moving ball that displayed the phase of the moon on any given date, while a host of tiny inscriptions served as a detailed user's manual, explaining the complex data the machine was generating. This single device shatters the popular image of ancient Greek science, which we often picture as philosophers in togas having abstract debates. The mechanism proves they had moved far beyond theory into the realm of precise, applied engineering. It demonstrates a deep understanding of astronomy, mathematics, and complex gear systems that we simply did not believe existed at that time. The knowledge required to build it, including a deep grasp of lunar anomalies and the Saros eclipse cycle, suggests it was not a unique miracle, but likely the pinnacle of a whole tradition of ancient Greek clockwork that has been completely lost to history. The fact that it was being transported on a ship implies it was a luxury item, perhaps commissioned by a wealthy individual or even destined for an educational institution, showing that this technology, while advanced, was known and valued. The greatest tragedy of the Antikythera mechanism is that its technological lineage was seemingly lost. The vast majority of ancient Greek texts have not survived, and it is possible that the knowledge to create such devices was recorded in manuals that were later destroyed or faded into obscurity. The subsequent rise of the Roman Empire, with its focus on more practical engineering like aqueducts and roads, may have shifted scientific priorities. The Great Library of Alexandria, which might have held the secrets to this technology, was destroyed. For over a millennium, this level of mechanical sophistication simply vanished from the world. The device itself settled onto the seafloor, its secrets preserved in silence for 2,000 years until a chance discovery by sponge divers brought it back into the light, offering us a humbling and awe-inspiring glimpse into a lost world of scientific genius that was far, far ahead of its time. Leaving behind the intricate gears of a lost technology, we now journey to a place where devotion was expressed not through metal, but through stone, on a scale so immense it transforms an entire river valley into a sanctuary. Carved into the limestone cliffs that rise above the Derinkuyu River in China's Henan province, the Longmen Grottos represent one of the most breathtaking and sustained acts of religious artistic creation in human history. This is not a single cave or a handful of shrines. It is an entire landscape of faith, a 2,000-meter-long gallery of rock-cut artistry containing over 2,300 caves and niches, and an astonishing 100,000 Buddhist statues. The scale is almost incomprehensible, a testament to the fervent piety of generations of patrons, from emperors to common citizens, who sought to earn merit by contributing to this monumental project. The creation of the Longmen Grottos unfolded over centuries, mirroring the rise and fall of dynasties and the evolution of Buddhist art itself. The work began around the year 493 Common Era, when the Northern Wei dynasty moved its capital to Loyang and brought its fervent Buddhist beliefs with them. The earliest caves from this period reflect a distinct artistic style influenced by Central Asian and Indian Gupta art, with Buddha figures often depicted as slender, elegant figures with enigmatic, almost abstract smiles wearing flowing robes. This style conveys a sense of ethereal transcendence, a focus on the Buddha's spiritual nature rather than his physical form. Later, during the Tang dynasty, the style matured into what is considered the absolute peak of Chinese Buddhist sculpture. The figures became more robust, realistic, and powerfully humanistic, with a profound emphasis on serene facial expressions and the intricate, naturalistic folds of their clothing. The grottos are a living textbook of this artistic evolution, with each cave acting as a chapter in the story of how Buddhism was not just imported into China, but completely absorbed and reinvented through a uniquely Chinese cultural lens. While the entire complex is awe-inspiring, one cave stands as the undisputed masterpiece, the pinnacle of Tang dynasty artistic achievement. This is the Fengxian Temple Cave, an open-air shrine dominated by a colossal statue that seems to radiate a palpable sense of peace and power. This is the Vairocana Buddha, the cosmic Buddha who represents the embodiment of ultimate reality. Seated in the lotus position, the figure towers over 17 meters tall, that's as high as a 5-story building. His face is a study in sublime serenity, with wide, gently downcast eyes that appear to gaze upon all visitors with infinite compassion and wisdom. Flanking him are a series of equally magnificent, though smaller, figures: his loyal disciple Ananda, the wise disciple Kassyapa, bodhisattvas adorned with exquisite jewelry, and fierce celestial guardians. Each is carved with an incredible attention to detail, from the delicate patterns on the bodhisattvas' crowns to the intricate drapery of their robes, which seems to flow and ripple as if made of real silk instead of solid limestone. The story behind this specific statue adds another layer to its wonder. It was commissioned in the 7th century by the only female emperor in Chinese history, Wu Zetian. Historical records suggest she personally donated a vast sum of her own cosmetics money to fund its construction, a powerful political and religious statement. In the intricate symbolism of the time, the Vairocana Buddha was seen as a spiritual sovereign, a ruler of the cosmic realm. By funding the creation of this largest and most magnificent Buddha at Longmen, whose face is said to have been subtly modeled after her own, Wu Zetian was making a profound claim to her own divine right to rule, seamlessly merging her earthly authority with spiritual legitimacy. The statue is thus not just a religious icon, it is a monument to one of history's most formidable rulers, a permanent record in stone of her ambition and piety. Beyond these imperial masterpieces, the true magic of Longmen lies in its democratic spirit. While emperors and nobles commissioned the largest caves, thousands of smaller niches were funded by everyone else: government officials, military officers, monks, nuns, and even laypeople's clubs and families. These smaller votive niches, often accompanied by inscriptions detailing the donor's name and their wish for good karma, for the health of their family, or for the rebirth of a loved one in a pure land, reveal the deeply personal nature of this vast endeavor. A walk through the grottos is not just a tour of imperial art, it is a walk through the hopes, fears, and deepest spiritual longings of an entire civilization, etched permanently into the face of a cliff for over 1,000 years. This collective effort, spanning multiple dynasties, transformed a simple limestone cliff into one of the most profound and moving artistic wonders ever created, a symphony of stone that continues to whisper the prayers of the past to all who stand before it. But if the Antikythera Mechanism represents a technological peak that was tragically lost, our next wonder takes us to a foundational moment, a discovery so profound it fundamentally rewrote the entire timeline of civilization in the Americas. For centuries, the Old World narrative held that complex society began in Mesopotamia and Egypt, and that any such development in the New World must have come much later, perhaps even inspired by transoceanic contact. Then, in the arid Soup Valley of Peru, archaeologists uncovered a city that silenced all those arguments, a metropolis so ancient it was thriving when the Great Pyramid of Giza was still being built. This is the sacred city of Caral, the crown jewel of the Caral Soup civilization, a site that forces us to completely reconsider the origins of urban life. Radiocarbon dating has firmly placed Caral's flourishing period between 2600 and 2000 before the Common Era, making it the oldest known center of civilization in the Americas by a staggering margin. For a sense of perspective, this places its development contemporaneously with the pyramids of Egypt and the great cities of Sumer. Yet Caral emerged in complete isolation, a pristine example of a civilization inventing itself from the ground up. The city's layout is a masterpiece of early urban planning, covering over 150 acres and organized into two distinct zones, a central core of monumental public architecture and outlying districts of residential buildings. The heart of the city is dominated by 6 massive pyramidal structures, immense earth and rock constructions faced with stone and plaster. The largest of these, the Pyramid Maya, rises to a height of over 90 feet and measures nearly 500 feet across at its base. Flanking these great mounds are sunken circular courts, meticulously crafted amphitheaters that served as focal points for community gatherings and, most likely, important religious ceremonies. What truly sets Caral apart and makes it such a profound puzzle for archaeologists is what is conspicuously absent. After decades of meticulous excavation, researchers have found no evidence of warfare whatsoever. There are no defensive walls, no fortifications, no moats, and no stockpiles of weapons. The art and iconography recovered from the site show no depictions of conquered enemies, bound prisoners, or violent conflict. Instead, the artifacts tell a story of a society deeply engaged with culture, commerce, and cosmology. They have uncovered a wealth of musical instruments, including 32 flutes made from condor and pelican bones and 37 cornets crafted from llama and deer bones, all exquisitely decorated. They found evidence of a complex trade network that brought spondylus shells from the warm waters of Ecuador, used in rituals, and dyes and seeds from the Amazon rainforest, indicating a vast and peaceful exchange of goods across diverse ecological zones. The genius of the Carol Soup people was not in their military might, but in their hydrological and agricultural mastery. They transformed a desert valley into a fertile garden by building sophisticated irrigation canals to channel water from the Soup River to their fields, where they grew crops like cotton, squash, beans, and guava. Their extensive cotton fields were key to their economy. They used the fiber to create the nets and lines for a massive and productive fishing industry along the nearby coast. This created a powerful economic engine. They traded their dried fish and shellfish with the inland communities for agricultural products, and they traded their surplus cotton with the coastal communities for even more fish. This system of mutual dependence and reciprocity, rather than conquest and plunder, appears to have been the foundation of their wealth and stability. This evidence paints a picture of a truly unique social model, a theocratic society likely governed by a class of priest astronomers who held power through their perceived ability to mediate with the gods and predict the celestial cycles that dictated the agricultural and ritual calendar. The alignment of the major monuments with key astronomical events supports this theory. The peaceful nature of Carol suggests that its citizens willingly contributed their labor to these grand communal projects, not under the threat of a whip, but out of a shared belief system and the tangible benefits that a centralized, organized society provided. The city stands as a powerful counterargument to the long-held assumption that civilization inevitably requires hierarchy, oppression, and chronic warfare. Carol presents the tantalizing possibility that human beings can indeed organize themselves into large, complex, and prosperous societies built on cooperation, intellectual pursuit, and spiritual belief. Its silent, sun-baked ruins challenge a fundamental narrative of history, offering a vision of a past where peace, not war, was the catalyst for one of humanity's earliest and most enduring wonders. After exploring the sunlit plazas and open-air monuments of ancient cities, we now plunge into the earth, into a world of shadow and stone, where survival depended on disappearing completely. In the heart of Turkey's otherworldly Cappadocia region, famed for its fairy chimney rock formations, lies a wonder of a very different kind, one that delves not up but down. This is the Derinkuyu underground city, a labyrinthine sanctuary so vast, so complex, and so ingeniously designed that it redefines our understanding of ancient underground engineering. This isn't a simple cave or a tunnel. It's a vertical metropolis, a self-contained world capable of sheltering up to 20,000 people for months at a time, hidden deep within the volcanic rock. The sheer scale of Derinkuyu is staggering. This is not a single level. It is a warren of at least 18 discovered floors, descending to a depth of nearly 280 feet, like a massive subterranean apartment building. Each level served a distinct and vital purpose, meticulously planned to sustain a large population in complete isolation from the world above. The upper floors contained spacious living quarters with rock-cut shelves, benches, and niches that functioned as beds and storage areas. Deeper down, you find communal kitchens with blackened ceilings from centuries of cooking fires, wine and oil presses, stables for livestock, and even a startlingly sophisticated network of ventilation shafts that ensured a constant supply of fresh air to even the lowest chambers. Most remarkably, there were dedicated spaces for worship, chiseled-out churches with vaulted ceilings and stone altars, ensuring the community's spiritual life could continue uninterrupted during their long confinement. This was a city in every sense of the word, with everything its inhabitants needed to live, work, and worship, all concealed beneath the surface. The engineering brilliance of Derinkuyu is most apparent in its defense mechanisms. The entire complex was designed to be sealed off from the outside world in a matter of moments. The entrance passages, which were cleverly disguised and scattered across the surface landscape, could be blocked by massive millstone-like doors. These were enormous circular wheels of solid volcanic rock, about 5 feet in diameter and weighing nearly half a ton. They were set into grooves and could be rolled into place from the inside, effectively creating a barrier that was virtually impossible to break through from the outside. Each level could also be isolated from the others using similar, though smaller, stone doors, allowing the defenders to control the movement of any intruders who might breach the initial entrance, effectively trapping them in a kill zone. This layered security system shows a profound understanding of defensive strategy, turning the entire city into a formidable fortress. But who built this incredible refuge, and what were they hiding from? The rock itself provides the first clue. Cappadocia's soft volcanic tuff is relatively easy to carve with simple tools but hardens upon exposure to air, making it an ideal material for creating stable underground structures. The earliest phases of construction are thought to have begun by the Phrygians around the 8th century before the Common Era, but the complex was expanded and perfected over centuries by subsequent inhabitants, including early Christians. The primary threat that necessitated such an elaborate hideaway was the relentless wave of invasions that swept across Anatolia. For the diverse communities of Cappadocia, whether they were pagan Phrygians, Byzantine Greeks, or later Christian Armenians, the surface was a dangerous place. They faced threats from every direction: Persian armies, marauding Mongols, and later Arab raids during the Byzantine-Arab Wars. The underground cities offered a desperate but highly effective solution. When scouts spotted an approaching army, the entire population of the surrounding area could gather their belongings and their livestock and vanish underground in a well-rehearsed drill, leaving the invaders above ground to find only empty, silent villages with no clue to where the people had gone. Life in this sunless world, while safe, would have been incredibly challenging. The air, though fresh from the ventilation shafts, would have been cool and damp. The only light came from flickering oil lamps, casting long shadows on the rough-hewn walls. Water was supplied from deep wells tapped into the underground water table, ensuring a supply that could not be poisoned or cut off by besiegers above. The waste was managed through carefully sealed pits. The people lived in close quarters, their lives governed by silence and secrecy, always listening for the sounds of danger from above or the all-clear signal that would allow them to return to the sunlight. The very existence of Derinkuyu and the other smaller underground cities in the region speaks to a history punctuated by profound fear and a resilient collective will to survive against overwhelming odds. It stands as a breathtaking monument not to the glory of empire, but to the raw human instinct for preservation, a hidden city of refuge carved from the living rock. Our journey now takes us to the eastern coast of India, to a temple so audacious in its conception and so masterful in its execution that it seems to defy both gravity and time itself. This is the Sun Temple of Konark, a monument that transcends the very idea of architecture to become something far greater, a colossal stone poem dedicated to the celestial power of the sun. Imagine approaching the shoreline and seeing not just a building, but a gigantic, petrified chariot, forever frozen in a moment of cosmic dynamism. This was the visionary goal of its creators, to build the chariot of the sun god Surya, a vehicle worthy of carrying the divine force that gives life to our world. The scale of this vision is immediately overwhelming. The entire temple complex is designed as this mythical chariot, and every single element is rendered in breathtaking, monumental detail. The chariot rides upon 24 immense, elaborately carved wheels, each one standing over 3 meters tall. These are not mere decorative motifs, They are masterpieces of sculpture and engineering, each one unique. The 24 wheels represent the 24 hours of the day, but they also symbolize the 12 months of the year doubled, reflecting the two halves of the day, day and night. Each wheel is an intricate stone mandala with 8 major spokes that represent the 8 prahars, or 3-hour periods of the Hindu day. The rims are carved with captivating floral designs, and the axles once supported massive sculpted figures. They are a perfect fusion of sacred art, advanced astronomy, and timekeeping, a stone clock of cosmic proportions. Pulling this gargantuan stone chariot are 7 mighty horses, carved with such muscular power and frenetic energy that they appear to be straining against their harnesses, moments from leaping forward into the sky. The number 7 is deeply symbolic, representing the 7 days of the week and the 7 colors of sunlight refracted through a prism. The horses charge forward towards the dawn, their dynamic posture creating an almost audible sense of motion and power. This incredible sense of movement is what sets Konark apart from any other temple. It feels less like a static building and more like a snapshot of a divine event, a moment of celestial transit captured for eternity in chlorite and laterite stone. As your eyes travel from the wheels and horses upward to the temple walls, you encounter another layer of Konark's profound complexity, the infamous erotic sculptures. The entire exterior surface of the temple is a densely packed tapestry of carved life, depicting everything from royal processions and military conquests to scenes of musicians, dancers, and animals. Interwoven throughout these everyday scenes are explicit, unflinching depictions of Maithuna, or sacred coupling. For centuries, these figures shocked and confused colonial-era observers who could not reconcile such imagery with a place of worship. However, their meaning is deeply spiritual. In the tantric traditions that influenced the temple's design, these sculptures represent the ultimate union of the male and female principles, the cosmic union of Shiva and Shakti that generates all creation. They symbolize the boundless, creative life force that the sun itself embodies, the ultimate source of all energy and vitality in the universe. They are a celebration of life in its most fundamental form, a theological statement carved in stone declaring that the divine is present in all aspects of existence, not just the austere and the solemn. Beyond its visible grandeur, Konark is shrouded in tantalizing legends that speak of even more astonishing secrets. The most persistent myth involves a powerful magnet. Folklore claims that the architects placed a massive lodestone at the apex of the main tower, and another set within the 2 giant lions that guard the entrance. The magnetic force was said to be so immense that it held the entire iron beam structure of the tower in perfect equilibrium, and it even affected the local magnetic field, causing ships passing at sea to wreck as their metal components were drawn irresistibly towards the shore. While there is no archaeological evidence for these magnets, the legend is so enduring that it has become a part of the temple's mystical identity. It speaks to a perceived technological magic, a level of knowledge that seems almost supernatural to us today. This brings us to the temple's greatest and most tragic mystery, the collapse of its main tower, the Rikadul, which once soared over 200 feet into the sky. Today, only the Jagmohana, the audience hall, remains standing, a magnificent but incomplete shell. The main sanctum, which once housed the presiding deity, is a mound of rubble. The cause of this catastrophic fall is hotly debated. The official explanation often points to structural weakness and the sheer weight of the tower causing a gradual collapse over centuries. Others point to historical records suggesting it was damaged in the 16th century by the army of the Muslim general Kalapahad. But the most captivating theory, one that intertwines with the magnet legend, suggests that the collapse was a direct result of that very technology. The story goes that the magnetic interference was disrupting compasses and causing so many shipwrecks that navigators petitioned for the removal of the lodestone. When it was taken out, the delicate architectural balance was destroyed, and the entire tower, held together by that magnetic force, came crashing down. Whether true or not, this story captures the essence of Konark, a place where myth, science, and art collided to create something so advanced, so powerful, that its own brilliance may have ultimately contributed to its magnificent ruin. It stands today not as a complete temple, but as a sublime and broken testament to humanity's attempt to build a heaven on earth for a god who rides the sky. Yet this stone metropolis was far more than a spiritual and political capital. It was the pulsating economic heart of a vast and sophisticated commercial empire. The true source of Great Zimbabwe's immense power and wealth lay not in its gold mines, but in its strategic genius as the ultimate middleman, controlling the flow of luxury goods between the resource-rich African interior and the bustling trade ports of the Swahili coast. Imagine a commercial network stretching thousands of miles with Great Zimbabwe as its central hub. From the highlands, vast caravans carrying ivory from elephant herds, gold dust painstakingly panned from riverbeds, and valuable copper ingots would converge on the city. These raw treasures of Africa were then funneled eastward towards the Indian Ocean, arriving in bustling ports like Sofala, a coastal city that essentially functioned as Zimbabwe's gateway to the world. In return, the city's elites acquired the exquisite manufactured goods that symbolized their status and connected them to a globalized medieval economy. The archaeological evidence for this trade is breathtaking and undeniable, painting a vivid picture of a city intimately connected to distant continents. Excavations within the ruins have unearthed a treasure trove of imported luxuries, shimmering glass beads from India, intricately patterned Celadon porcelain from the kilns of China's Song and Ming dynasties, delicate Persian glassware, and even fragments of Near Eastern brass. Perhaps most tellingly, coins minted in the distant Sultanate of Kilwa on the coast of modern-day Tanzania have been found, providing concrete proof of a monetized long-distance trade relationship. Each of these artifacts is a silent witness to a caravan that completed an epic journey, a testament to the economic reach of a civilization that European explorers would later claim had no history. This immense wealth flowing through the city's gates supported a highly stratified and specialized society. The ruler and his court, likely residing within the secluded and prestigious hill complex, controlled this trade, taxing goods and amassing fortune that allowed them to command the labor to build the Great Walls. But the prosperity trickled down, supporting a class of skilled artisans who called the city home. Archaeologists have found evidence of specialized workshops where metalsmiths crafted fine jewelry and tools from gold and iron, while weavers produced magnificent textiles from local cotton. Soapstone carvers, in particular, seem to have held a special place, creating the iconic Zimbabwe birds soapstone sculptures perched on monoliths that likely represented symbols of royal authority and spiritual guardianship. This division of labor, with traders, artisans, administrators, and laborers all playing their part, is the hallmark of a complex, sophisticated urban society, one that was every bit as dynamic and organized as its medieval European or Asian counterparts. Great Zimbabwe was not an isolated African anomaly. It was a major player in the medieval world, a city whose economic savvy built an empire of stone and trade, forever rewriting the narrative of Africa's role in global history. While the silent gaze of the Moai is haunting, the question of how they arrived at their coastal homes is one of archaeology's most captivating engineering puzzles. Weighing up to 82 tons and standing as tall as a 3-story building, these giants were born in a single quarry at the volcanic crater of Rano Raraku. Their journey to ceremonial platforms, or ahu, sometimes miles away across rugged, hilly terrain, seems almost impossible for a society without metal tools, wheels, or draft animals. For generations, the prevailing theory involved a slow, arduous process of log rolling. This idea suggested that teams of workers would lay down a track of felled palm logs, using ropes to rock the statue onto the rollers, then painstakingly move the logs from the back to the front as the moai inched forward. This method, while seemingly logical, became the centerpiece of a tragic ecological parable. It was argued that the obsession with statue transport led to the rampant deforestation of the island, as every new moai required the consumption of countless trees for its journey, ultimately triggering the society's collapse. However, recent experimental archaeology has turned this entire narrative on its head, offering a far more elegant and likely solution that aligns perfectly with the island's own oral traditions. When Czech engineer Pavel and later archaeologists Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo attempted to move a full-scale replica, they tried the log rolling method and found it ungainly, slow, and incredibly damaging to both the statue and the landscape. Then they tried something different, by using 3 teams of rope pullers, one on each side to rock the statue, and one at the rear to control the forward motion and prevent it from tipping over. They discovered they could make the moai walk. With a rhythmic rocking from side to side, the statue could be maneuvered upright in a shuffling gait that covered ground surprisingly quickly and efficiently. This method required far fewer people than previously thought, and most importantly, it required no trees at all. The Rapa Nui people had always said the statues walked to their platforms. It seems modern science finally found a way to listen. This revelation forces a dramatic rethinking of the island's infamous collapse. If the moai walked, then the deforestation couldn't be blamed solely on their transportation. The palm trees that once covered the island were likely cleared for agriculture to feed a growing population, and perhaps to make way for the extensive rock gardens used to cultivate sweet potatoes. The trees may also have been lost to the Polynesian rats that arrived with the first settlers, which would have devoured the palm nuts, preventing the forests from regenerating. The story shifts from one of reckless ecocide to a more complex tragedy of a fragile ecosystem meeting the demands of a successful and growing society. The true wonder of the moai's journey, therefore, is not a cautionary tale about stupidity, but a testament to incredible ingenuity. Moving these multi-ton statues by walking them reveals a sophisticated understanding of physics, momentum, a ND Chinese letter labor organization. It would have required precise coordination, rhythmic chanting, and the skilled direction of master engineers, showcasing a highly organized and cooperative society capable of achieving the seemingly impossible with nothing but rope, muscle, and brilliant intellect. But the true genius of the Terracotta Army lies not just in its artistic diversity, but in the breathtaking industrial and technological operation that produced it. This was not a single, sprawling art project. It was history's first known mass production factory, a state-sponsored complex of organized workshops that operated with a precision and efficiency that would feel familiar to a modern industrial engineer. The emperor's demand for thousands of life-sized soldiers in a relatively short time frame necessitated a revolutionary system. Archaeologists studying the site have found fascinating clues, stamps and inscriptions on the statues revealing the names of over 80 different master craftsmen and their workshops. This wasn't a case of one artisan lovingly crafting one entire statue from head to toe. Instead, they employed a sophisticated assembly line process where different workshops specialized in manufacturing specific, standardized parts. Imagine a production floor from the 3rd century before the Common Era. One group of artisans would have focused solely on crafting legs, building them from thick coils of clay rolled into a solid, stable base. Another workshop, perhaps in a different part of the vast complex, would have specialized in torsos, hollowing them out to make them lighter and to prevent cracking during the firing process. Yet another team would have produced the arms, heads, and hands. This modular approach allowed for incredible efficiency and a degree of customization. Once the basic components were made, they were brought together for assembly. The hollow torsos were joined to the solid legs with the seam expertly smoothed over. Arms and hands were attached, often held in place by clay dowels. Finally, a pre-made head was seated onto the torso, completing the basic form of the warrior. It was this system that allowed for the army's stunning individuality. With a set number of body and limb types, the artisans could then focus their creative energy on the most important part, the face. Using hand modeling techniques, they would add unique facial features, expressions, hairstyles, and ears to each head, ensuring that no two soldiers were ever exactly alike. This marriage of standardized production and bespoke artistry is a concept centuries ahead of its time. The next step in the process was perhaps the most perilous, firing these colossal clay figures. We are not talking about small pottery kilns here. Each warrior weighs several hundred pounds, and firing such a large, thick object made of clay is a recipe for disaster. As the clay heats and the moisture turns to steam, the pressure can easily cause the entire piece to explode. The Qin dynasty kiln masters solved this problem with incredible ingenuity. They built massive, trench-like kilns that could reach temperatures over 900 degrees Celsius. The key to their success was the hollow construction of the torsos and the careful control of the firing process. The hollow core allowed the intense heat to circulate more evenly and let the steam escape without building up catastrophic pressure. The firing would have been a slow, meticulously managed process, taking several days to heat up and several more to cool down. The fact that so many figures survived this ordeal intact is a testament to their profound understanding of materials science and pyrotechnology. Once a warrior emerged successfully from the kiln, it was not the dull, earthen color we see today. It was a riot of vibrant, lifelike color. Teams of painters would then apply layers of lacquer, a sap from the lacquer tree, and then pigments made from precious minerals to create a stunningly realistic appearance. The lacquer acted as a primer, helping the paint adhere to the rough terracotta surface. The palette was both expensive and brilliant, cinnabar for bright reds, malachite for greens, azurite for blues, and hematite for rich purples and browns. These pigments were mixed with binding agents and carefully applied to depict elaborate armor, detailed uniforms, and even flesh tones. The result was an army of breathtaking realism, a polychrome force that must have been utterly dazzling to behold. Tragically, when the pits were breached in antiquity, the exposure to dry air caused the lacquer to curl and flake off, taking the pigment with it. Within minutes, most of the figures lost their paint forever. Today, archaeologists use cutting-edge preservation techniques to save any remaining flecks of color they find, a race against time to protect the last hints of the army's original splendor. Perhaps the most astonishing technological marvel, however, was the army's real weaponry. These terracotta soldiers were not merely sculptures, they were equipped with fully functional bronze weapons, tens of thousands of them. Archaeologists have uncovered swords, daggers, spears, lance tips, battle axes, crossbow triggers, and thousands of arrowheads, all cast from bronze. The quality of these weapons is extraordinary. The blades were cast with such precision and sharpened to such a fine edge that they remain dangerous today. But the real shock came from metallurgical analysis. The bronze swords, in particular, revealed a secret that should not have existed for another 2 millennia. They were coated with a thin layer of chromium dioxide, a form of chrome plating that prevented tarnishing and rust. This 10 to 15 micron thick layer kept the weapons gleaming and, more importantly, lethally sharp through centuries of burial in damp conditions. The process, known as chromate conversion coating, involves treating the bronze with a chromium-rich salt solution. How the Qin artisans discovered this complex anti-corrosion technology remains a complete mystery. It is a lost innovation that would not be rediscovered until the 19th century in Germany. This, combined with the standardized, interchangeable parts of the crossbow triggers, evidence of an early form of mass production for complex mechanisms, shows a level of technological prowess that shatters our image of the ancient world. The terracotta army is more than art. It is a frozen moment from a lost industrial revolution, a testament to a bureaucratic and technological machine that was every bit as formidable as the military one it was built to represent. This radical reinterpretation of Göbekli Tepe's purpose forces us to confront a monumental question about human history itself. What if the very foundation of civilization, the shift from nomadic hunting and gathering to settled farming, wasn't driven by a desperate struggle for survival, but by a collective spiritual yearning? The prevailing narrative for over a century has been one of economic necessity. Humans domesticated plants and animals to secure a stable food supply, and this surplus of food then allowed for the development of specialized roles, social hierarchy, and eventually organized religion. Göbekli Tepe turns this entire sequence upside down. The evidence carved into its pillars and scattered across its floors suggests that it was the powerful, shared impulse to come together and worship that created the need for a stable food supply, not the other way around. The proof for this lies in the remnants of ancient feasts. Archaeologists sifting through the soil at Göbekli Tepe have uncovered staggering quantities of animal bones, tens of thousands of them from wild species like aurochs massive, now extinct wild cattle, gazelle, and wild ass. This isn't the typical refuse of a small, nomadic band slowly consuming a single kill. This is the debris of large-scale, ritualistic feasting on a truly epic scale. The analysis of these bones shows they come from animals hunted far and wide, brought to this central location for a specific purpose. This was not about daily sustenance. It was about periodic, communal gatherings where food was used to fuel a spiritual experience, to create social bonds, and to attract a large labor force. The sheer caloric requirement to feed the hundreds of people needed to build these structures would have been immense, creating a powerful, new pressure to secure vast amounts of food in a predictable way. This need for predictable resources for ritual may have planted the very first seeds of agriculture, quite literally. The most tantalizing clue comes from the chemical analysis of large stone troughs found at the site. Residue tests have revealed traces of oxalate, a chemical compound that forms during the fermentation of grains, specifically from a type of wild grass called einkorn wheat, which grew abundantly in the region. This is the strongest evidence we have for early beer production, likely a thick, gruel-like alcoholic beverage. The act of brewing beer is a complex, multi-step process that requires knowledge, planning, and a settled location to monitor the fermentation. It suggests a deep understanding of plant properties that far exceeds simple foraging. Why go through all this trouble? This ritual beer was likely the centerpiece of the feasts, a mind-altering substance used to facilitate trance states, commune with the animal spirits depicted on the pillars, and strengthen the social cohesion of the group. To ensure a steady supply of grain for this sacred beverage, the people might have begun to encourage the growth of wild grasses near the site, protecting them from other animals and selectively harvesting them, the first unconscious steps toward domestication. This theory transforms our understanding of the Neolithic Revolution. Instead of a slow, pragmatic drift toward farming, it proposes a dramatic, purposeful shift driven by ideology. The hunter-gatherers who built Göbekli Tepe were not poor, struggling primitives. They were sophisticated, spiritually complex people with a rich symbolic world. The project of constructing and maintaining this ritual center required a level of organization and sustained effort that was impossible for completely nomadic groups. It would have necessitated a more settled existence, at least for a core group of ritual specialists and skilled stonemasons. This semi-sedentary life, centered around a fixed place of worship, created the perfect laboratory for experimentation. The need to reliably feed the builders and the feasting congregations provided the incentive to manipulate the environment, to begin the process of cultivating plants and eventually domesticating animals. In this light, agriculture begins to look less like a brilliant economic invention and more like a necessary byproduct of a massive religious building project, the world's first catering service for the gods. Göbekli Tepe, therefore, stands as a monumental challenge to our materialist view of history. It suggests that what ultimately compelled humans to abandon a 2 million-year-old lifestyle of hunting and gathering was not the discovery of how to grow food, but the discovery of how to build meaning. The desire to create a permanent connection to the spiritual world, to gather in awe before colossal symbols of power and mystery, provided the why, the motivation to organize society on a grand scale. The practical knowledge of farming then became the how, the tool that made this new collective spiritual life possible. This sacred site implies that the cathedral came before the city, that the prayer preceded the plow, and that humanity's first great leap forward was not a calculated economic decision, but a leap of faith. But if the ritual water cult theory explains the why, the how of their celestial precision is equally astonishing. Many of the Nazca lines demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of astronomy, acting as a giant observatory etched into the desert floor. Researchers have found that a number of the long, straight lines point directly to the spot on the horizon where the sun rises or sets during the June and December solstices, the two most important dates in the Andean agricultural calendar. These solar alignments would have been critical for timing planting and harvest seasons in an environment where water was everything. Other lines appear to track the rising points of certain stars and constellations that held significance in Andean mythology, effectively turning the entire pampa into a massive astronomical calendar. The giant spider geoglyph, for instance, is believed to be a representation of the constellation we know as Orion, while the monkey with its coiled tail may be linked to the Pleiades star cluster, which was associated with water and fertility. This wasn't just art for art's sake, it was a functional, spiritual technology designed to synchronize human activity with the cycles of the cosmos, a desperate and brilliant attempt to bring order and predictability to an unpredictable world. No discussion of the Nazca lines is complete without honoring the woman who became their most devoted guardian and interpreter. Maria Reich, a German mathematician and archaeologist, first visited the Pampa in the 1940s and would dedicate the next 5 decades of her life to their study and preservation. Armed with little more than a ladder, a broom, a notebook, and an unwavering passion, Reich became known as the Lady of the Lines. She was the first to meticulously map and document hundreds of the figures and trajectories, and she was the leading proponent of the astronomical calendar theory. She passionately argued that the Nazca people used simple surveying techniques, scaling up small models using stakes and ropes to achieve their remarkable accuracy. But her most vital role was that of a protector. As the lines faced increasing threats from vehicular traffic and tourism, Reich used her own meager funds to hire guards and personally campaigned to the Peruvian government for the site's protection. She lived in a small house near the desert, often sweeping the lines herself to keep them clear of debris, a solitary figure fighting to preserve one of the world's greatest mysteries from the careless footprint of the modern world. Her lifelong dedication ensured that this wonder would survive for future generations to study and admire. Of course, a mystery of this scale inevitably attracts more speculative explanations, the most famous being the theory that the Nazca lines were landing strips or navigation beacons for ancient astronauts. Popularized by author Erich von Däniken in the 1960s, this idea captured the public's imagination by suggesting that the giant marks, only visible from the air, were meant for extraterrestrial visitors. While a compelling science fiction narrative, this theory is overwhelmingly rejected by archaeologists for several key reasons. First, it fundamentally ignores the cultural context and proven capabilities of the Nazca people themselves, resorting to an external explanation for achievement that we now understand was well within their grasp. Second, the desert surface is made of soft soil and loose stones. It is entirely unsuitable for the landing of any heavy aircraft or spacecraft, which would have left massive gouges and utterly destroyed the very lines they were meant to target. The lines themselves show no evidence of propulsion or heat that would be associated with such vehicles. Ultimately, the ancient astronaut theory does a great disservice to the ingenuity of the Nazca culture. It replaces a fascinating story of human adaptation, spiritual belief, and artistic genius with a simplistic and ultimately unconvincing deus ex machina. The true wonder of the Nazca lines lies not in attributing them to aliens, but in appreciating the incredible drive and skill of the people who, 2,000 years ago, turned their entire desert into a sacred canvas for communicating with their gods. But the Nabateans' true genius wasn't just in their ability to carve. It was in their profound mastery over the one resource more precious than any traded spice or gemstone in the desert: water. Their entire empire was an oasis built upon a foundation of hydrological brilliance, a network of water capture and distribution so sophisticated it transformed a barren canyon into a verdant, thriving metropolis capable of supporting tens of thousands of people. This wasn't a matter of mere survival. It was a deliberate, calculated engineering project on a colossal scale, turning a flash flood-prone wadi into a life-giving artery. At the heart of this system was a deep understanding of the desert's harsh climate. The Nabateans knew that rain was infrequent but could be devastatingly intense, sending torrents of water screaming through the narrow canyon of the Sick. Instead of trying to resist these forces, they cleverly harnessed them. Their first and most critical line of defense was a series of massive dams and diversion tunnels. They constructed a large dam at the very entrance to the Sick, designed not to hold water back permanently, but to redirect the initial, most violent surge of a flash flood into a bypass tunnel they had carved through the solid rock of the adjacent mountain. This ingenious structure prevented the main channel from being scoured and eroded, protecting the elaborate facades and the city center downstream. Smaller dams and diversion walls throughout the surrounding hills captured runoff from a vast catchment area, channeling every possible drop toward the city. Once this water was captured, the real magic of distribution began. The Nabateans carved or built channels known as aqueducts along the sides of the Sick. These weren't simple ditches. Many were carefully plastered to prevent seepage and covered with stone slabs to minimize evaporation and keep out debris. These channels acted as the main pipelines, gently sloping to carry water by gravity from the collection dams all the way into the heart of the city. For tighter spaces or to maintain a consistent gradient, they didn't hesitate to tunnel directly through rock outcrops. The entire length of the Sick, the majestic natural corridor leading to the city, was in fact a functional aqueduct, a beautiful marriage of nature and engineering where every step a visitor took was alongside flowing water. Within the city itself, this water was managed with incredible precision. A vast network of over 200 cisterns, both large public reservoirs and smaller private ones, were carved into the cliff faces or dug into the ground and sealed with waterproof plaster. These acted as a buffer, storing enough water to sustain the population through long periods of drought. The water was then distributed through a system of terracotta pipes, an innovation that allowed for unprecedented control. These pipes, with their narrow diameters, maintained pressure and could be routed directly to specific locations, to public fountains where citizens could fill their jars, to luxurious palace baths, and crucially, to the extensive gardens that made Petra famous for its beauty. The pressure was even sufficient to feed decorative cascades and pools in front of the great tombs, turning the city of stone into a city of gardens. This hydrological mastery was the absolute cornerstone of Nabatean power. It allowed them to offer something no other stop on the trade routes could: reliable, abundant fresh water in the middle of the desert. Caravans arriving from weeks in the arid wilderness would have found Petra not just a safe haven, but a paradise. They could water their thousands of camels, refill their own supplies, and bathe in comfort, all for a price, of course. The wealth generated from this control over water funded the entire city, proving that in the desert, the ability to command a flowing stream was far more valuable than any chest of gold. It was a sustainable system that worked in harmony with the environment for centuries, a testament to a civilization that didn't conquer the desert, but learned to dance with it, coaxing life from the stone with an ingenuity that remains breathtaking to this day. While the grand facade and the story of its patron are captivating, the true soul of the Library of Celsus was found within the scroll niches carved into its walls. This was not merely a storage facility for books, it was a powerful symbol of a profound intellectual transfer, a physical embodiment of Rome's embrace and preservation of Greek learning. After conquering the Greek world militarily, Rome found itself conquered culturally, adopting Hellenistic philosophy, art, and scientific inquiry as the foundation of its own elite education. The Library of Celsus, situated in a Greek-speaking city that was a jewel of the Roman East, stands as the perfect monument to this fusion. It represented the Roman ideal of humanitas, the refinement of the spirit through exposure to the greatest ideas of civilization. By housing thousands of Greek texts, the library signaled that true power was not just about legions and laws, but also about wisdom, poetry, and the life of the mind. Imagine the sheer scope of knowledge contained within those 12,000 scrolls. Each handwritten papyrus roll, carefully stored in labeled leather cases or wooden boxes, represented a fragment of the ancient world's intellectual universe. A scholar or curious citizen browsing the collections would have had access to the foundational texts of Western thought. There would have been the complete works of Homer, the epic poems that were the bedrock of Greek identity, alongside the tragedies of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. The shelves would have held the dense philosophical dialogues of Plato and the empirical treatises of Aristotle, whose works on everything from biology to ethics formed the core of the curriculum. But the collection was undoubtedly vast and eclectic, extending far beyond the Greek classics to include Roman law, local histories of Anatolia, groundbreaking medical texts by figures like Galen, who worked nearby in Pergamum, and astronomical theories that tried to map the heavens. This was a universal library aiming to gather the entirety of human knowledge, from the laws that governed men to the science that explained the cosmos, all under one magnificent roof. In the ancient world, a great library was far more than a quiet place for solitary study. It was a vibrant cultural and social hub, the intellectual engine of a city. The Library of Celsus would have been a buzzing center of activity. In its halls and courtyards, you would find teachers lecturing to groups of students, scribes meticulously copying damaged texts to preserve them for posterity, and translators working to render Greek ideas into Latin or vice versa. Wealthy patrons and diplomats might meet there to discuss affairs of state, using the setting to project an image of erudition and sophistication. For the citizens of Ephesus, the library was a potent symbol of their city's status, a declaration that they were not a provincial backwater but a leading center of culture and learning within the empire. It was a place to see and be seen, to engage in spirited debate, to hear the latest poetry, and to access an education that could elevate one's social standing. This role as a civic pillar, a place where knowledge was both revered and actively used in daily life, is what made the great libraries of antiquity so vital to their communities. This makes the library's destruction not just the loss of a beautiful building, but a catastrophic cultural amnesia. When fire, likely sparked by an earthquake or during a Gothic raid in the 3rd century, ravaged the library's interior, it didn't just burn wood and papyrus. It incinerated irreplaceable chunks of human history. Each scroll that turned to ash represented a unique work, often the only copy in existence. We can only speculate about what was lost forever, perhaps complete plays by the great tragedians that we now only know by title, historical accounts that would have reshaped our understanding of ancient kingdoms, or scientific theories that were millennia ahead of their time. The destruction of the Library of Celsus is a single chapter in a much larger story of loss that includes the burning of the Library of Alexandria. These events created immense gaps in our historical record, leaving us with fragments and summaries of works where we should have the complete texts. The silence left by these fires is a haunting reminder of the fragility of knowledge, a warning that the collective memory of civilization can be erased in a moment, leaving future generations infinitely poorer for it. To appreciate the vibrant stories unfolding across the walls of the Ajanta caves, we must first understand the incredible technical preparation that made this ancient artistry possible. The artists didn't simply paint onto rough, unprepared rock. They began by chiseling the volcanic basalt walls to create a slightly rough, keyed surface that would grip the plaster to come. Then they applied a foundational layer, a mix of clay, hay, animal hair, and surprisingly cow dung. Far from being a primitive choice, the fermented cow dung provided organic fibers that acted as a binding agent, preventing the plaster from cracking as it dried in the cave's humidity. Over this base, they added a second, finer coat of smooth lime mud plaster, and finally, a thin, gleaming white finish layer of lime plaster mixed with a binder, perhaps glue made from boiled fruit or animal hide. This meticulous, multi-stage process created a perfectly smooth, bright white canvas that was not only ideal for painting, but also helped protect the art from the moisture seeping through the cave walls, a preservation technique that has proven its worth for over 1,500 years. The palette they worked with was a symphony of nature, each color sourced and prepared with the utmost care. For brilliant whites and highlights, they used lime and kaolin clay. Yellows and vibrant orange reds came from yellow ochre and red ochre, iron-rich minerals gathered from the earth. A rich, velvety black was produced from soot collected from oil lamps and mixed with gum. But the most coveted and expensive color was a stunning lapis lazuli blue, a pigment ground from the semi-precious stone that had to be imported all the way from the mines of Afghanistan. Greens were created from terre verte, a natural green earth pigment. These minerals were painstakingly ground into fine powders using stone slabs and mullers, then mixed with a water-soluble binding medium. Scholars believe this binder was likely gum from the acacia tree, which would hold the pigment particles together and allow them to adhere to the plaster surface. The result was a range of colors that could be applied with the subtlety of watercolor, yet possessed a remarkable durability. The true genius of the Ajanta artists, however, lies in their application, a technique that gives the paintings their breathtaking, lifelike quality. They primarily used a tempera method, applying these mineral pigments mixed with their binder onto the dry plaster surface. This allowed for incredible detail and fine lines. Their mastery of light and shadow is what truly sets their work apart, creating a stunning illusion of three-dimensional form on a two-dimensional wall. They achieved this through a masterful use of shading, often applying a darker tone of a color to define the contours of a body, a nose, a shoulder, the curve of a breast, and then using a lighter tone or even white to highlight the area where light would naturally fall. This technique, known as modeling, gives the figures a soft, rounded, and incredibly realistic presence. Look at the face of a bodhisattva, and you can see the gentle glow on a cheekbone, the soft shadow under a chin. The figures seem to breathe and emerge from the wall itself. Beyond individual figures, the artists demonstrated a sophisticated, if intuitive, understanding of perspective to create a sense of depth in their complex narrative scenes. They used overlapping forms to suggest that one figure was in front of another. To depict architecture or the interior of a palace, they often employed a form of perspective by implication, where the lines of a throne or a doorway are drawn at an angle, creating a sense of receding space. In scenes showing groups of people, figures in the foreground are painted larger and in greater detail, while those meant to be perceived as further away are shown smaller and higher up on the picture plane. This creates a remarkable sense of a crowded court or a bustling celestial heaven. The most captivating example is the portrayal of the flying apsaras. They are not drawn with rigid lines but are suggested through flowing, effortless brushstrokes that capture the sheer movement and weightlessness of their celestial dance, their scarves and garments rippling behind them as if caught in an eternal breeze. This artistic revolution at Ajanta did not remain confined to its dark caves. The techniques and aesthetic principles developed here became the bedrock for Buddhist art across Asia, carried by monks, pilgrims, and traders along the Silk Road. The vibrant color palette, the emphasis on graceful, compassionate figures, and the expressive narrative style can be seen echoing through the Buddhist caves of Central Asia, like those at Dunhuang in China. The influence traveled all the way to the Far East, impacting the artistic traditions of Korea and Japan. The Ajanta caves were not an isolated phenomenon. They were a seminal academy, a creative explosion that set a new standard for visual storytelling. The artists working here were both master craftsmen and profound theologians, translating the deepest tenets of Buddhist philosophy: compassion, tranquility, and the path to enlightenment, into a universal visual language that could speak across centuries and cultures, making the stone walls themselves radiate with spiritual warmth and human emotion. Descending deeper into the Hal Saflieni Hypogeum, we move beyond its visual marvels to encounter a wonder that is not seen but felt, a phenomenon that vibrates through the very bones of the structure and the body of the visitor. This is the realm of its acoustic mysteries, a layer of design so sophisticated it suggests the Neolithic builders were not just master stoneworkers, but perhaps the world's first architectural acoustic engineers. Within this silent, subterranean world, sound behaves in ways that are utterly alien to the world above, and one chamber in particular holds the key to this sonic secret, the Oracle Room. Stepping into this small, circular chamber in the heart of the middle level, the first thing you might notice are the elegant red ochre spirals adorning the ceiling. But the true magic reveals itself when someone speaks. A deep male voice intoning a specific frequency within this space does not simply echo, it undergoes a profound transformation. The sound doesn't just bounce off the walls, it resonates. It amplifies and sustains, creating a pervasive, low-frequency hum that seems to emanate from the stone itself. This is not a vague reverberation. It is a precise, physical vibration that can be felt in your chest and heard echoing throughout the entire labyrinth of connected chambers. The effect is disorienting, mesmerizing, and deeply powerful, a sensory experience that feels both supernatural and deeply meditative. Scientific analysis has pinpointed the reason for this extraordinary effect. The chamber is finely tuned to resonate at a fundamental frequency of 110 Hz. This is not a random number, it sits at the very threshold of human hearing in the low-frequency range. Research into the impact of sound on human consciousness has revealed something astonishing. Exposure to frequencies at or near 110 Hz appears to have a measurable effect on brain activity. Studies using EEG scans have shown that listening to sound at this frequency can cause a shift in brainwave patterns, specifically a suppression of the brain's left frontal lobe activity, which is associated with logic, language, and linear thinking. Concurrently, there is often an increase in activity in the right frontal lobe, the center for creativity, intuition, and holistic perception. In essence, this specific sonic vibration seems to gently nudge the brain into a more suggestible, meditative, and potentially visionary state. This leads to the compelling and controversial question: was this an intentional design feature or an incredible happy accident? The sheer precision of the effect makes it difficult to dismiss as mere coincidence. The architects of the Hypogeum carved this chamber and the entire complex from the solid limestone with nothing but stone and antler tools. To achieve such a specific acoustic property would have required an intuitive, perhaps even a formal, understanding of how sound waves interact with space, the density of rock, and the shape of a room. They would have had to meticulously sculpt the walls, ceiling, and floor to vibrate in perfect harmony. The alternative, that this profound sonic phenomenon was an unplanned byproduct of the chamber's size and shape, seems almost too fortuitous. The weight of evidence leans toward intention, suggesting a lost Neolithic science of sacred sound. If it was intentional, the purpose seems clear: to weaponize acoustics for spiritual transformation. During rituals, a shaman or priest speaking or chanting from within the oracle room would have had their voice utterly transformed. That deep, resonant hum would have filled the entire Hypogeum, reaching the hundreds of people gathered in the outer halls and chambers. To the participants, it would not have sounded like a man speaking. It would have been perceived as the disembodied voice of the Earth Mother herself, or the collective murmur of the 7,000 ancestors buried within the walls. This auditory illusion would have been overwhelmingly powerful, bypassing critical thought and directly accessing the emotional and spiritual centers of the brain. It was the ultimate tool for facilitating altered states of consciousness, for making the intangible feel terrifyingly real, and for binding the community together through a shared, awe-inspiring experience. The Hypogeum is not an isolated example of this ancient acoustic wisdom. Across the Neolithic world, from the massive echoing chambers of Newgrange in Ireland to the chanting galleries of Mayan pyramids, we find evidence that ancient cultures understood and harnessed the power of sound. They used it as a technology of the spirit, a way to alter perception, enhance memory through rhythmic oral traditions, and create a palpable sense of the sacred. The Hypogeum of Hal Saflieni stands as the oldest and most sophisticated example of this practice. It pushes us to radically reconsider the capabilities of our prehistoric ancestors. They were not primitive cavemen. They were deep ecologists of consciousness who understood that the human mind could be shaped by its environment, and that architecture could be a machine for generating transcendence. In the profound silence of their buried sanctuary, they discovered that the right frequency could make the very stones sing, and in doing so, open a doorway to the divine. Yet the true measure of Teotihuacan's greatness lies not just within its own city limits, but in the vast shadow it cast across all of ancient Mesoamerica. This was not an isolated city-state. It was the first true superpower of the Americas, a cultural and political force whose influence rippled out for over 1,000 miles, reshaping the destiny of every civilization it touched. The evidence for this is etched into the stones of distant cities and woven into the very fabric of their art and religion, revealing a network of connection far more complex than simple trade. Teotihuacan's reach was so profound that to understand the classical era of the Maya, the Zapotecs, or the peoples of the Gulf Coast is to understand their relationship with the giant from the Valley of Mexico. One of the most direct and startling pieces of evidence for this influence comes from the heart of the Maya world itself. At the great city of Tikal in present-day Guatemala, archaeologists have uncovered what can only be described as a Teotihuacano neighborhood. This wasn't just a few imported potsherds. This was a distinct district featuring architecture utterly alien to the Maya lowlands. The buildings were constructed in the distinctive talud tableau style, the sloping base and vertical panel that defines Teotihuacan's pyramids, and were made from lime plaster instead of the traditional Maya limestone. Even more telling, the artifacts found within were pure Teotihuacan: distinctive thin orange pottery, cylindrical tripod vessels, and incense burners adorned with the image of Tlaloc, the storm god of the central Mexican highlands. This suggests not merely trade, but an actual enclave of Teotihuacano people living within Tikal, a permanent diplomatic or merchant colony that served as a direct conduit for the flow of ideas, goods, and perhaps even authority between the two great powers. This physical presence coincides with a dramatic and violent turning point in Tikal's history. In the year 378 Common Era, a decisive event occurred, recorded on a Maya stela with uncharacteristic bluntness. It describes the arrival of a figure named Siege, which translates ominously to "fire is born." The text states that he arrived at Tikal under the auspices of a powerful foreign overlord from the west, a ruler with a name that sounds decidedly non-Maya. On the very same day that Fire is Born entered Tikal, the city's existing king, Chak Tok Ikok, mysteriously died, shortly thereafter, a new boy king was installed on the throne, a child with clear paternal ties to the powerful foreign power in the West, almost certainly Teotihuacan. This reads less like a friendly cultural exchange and more like a military intervention or an orchestrated regime change. It appears Teotihuacan, whether through direct invasion or by supporting a faction within Tikal, effectively took over one of the most powerful Maya cities, installing a puppet ruler and integrating it into its own sphere of influence. This event sent shockwaves through the Maya world, triggering alliances and wars among other city-states that would define the region's politics for centuries. Beyond raw power, Teotihuacan exported a powerful cultural and religious package that was eagerly adopted by elites across the region. The most potent symbol of this was the feathered serpent, known to the Aztecs as Quetzalcoatl, but whose worship clearly originated centuries earlier at Teotihuacan. The city's own temple of the feathered serpent is covered in stunning, fearsome carvings of this deity, representing a fusion of the natural world, the serpent, with the celestial realm, the precious Quetzal bird feathers. This god, associated with wind, rain, and legitimate political authority, became a massively popular icon of kingship. Maya rulers, keen to borrow the prestige and aura of the mighty Teotihuacan, began eagerly adopting the feathered serpent into their own royal iconography. They depicted themselves wearing Teotihuacano-style war costumes, with the distinctive tasseled headdress and the shell-shaped pendant, and incorporated the goggled eyes of Tlaloc into their own ceremonial mask. Adopting these symbols was a way to legitimize their own rule, to cloak themselves in the perceived power and sophistication of the great metropolis, much like a modern leader might invoke the language of democracy or progress. When this titan of the ancient world finally fell, its collapse was not a local event. It was a seismic shock that destabilized the entire Mesoamerican world system. Around the year 550 Common Era, the core of Teotihuacan was violently burned and systematically desecrated, likely in an uprising from within. The central authority that had provided goods, stability, and a cultural focal point for centuries vanished almost overnight. The result was a massive power vacuum. The trade routes that had funneled obsidian, exotic feathers, and cacao across the continent fractured and became insecure. Cities that had relied on Teotihuacan for economic patronage or political support were suddenly adrift. In the Maya region, the collapse correlates with what scholars call the hiatus, a period where the erection of dated monuments sharply declined, suggesting widespread political turmoil and instability. The downfall of the giant created 100 smaller fights over the pieces of its empire. In the power vacuum left behind, new cities rose to prominence by claiming the mantle of Teotihuacan, often mimicking its architectural styles and invoking its gods to bolster their own legitimacy. The death of this first great metropolis was the defining trauma of the classical period, an event so catastrophic that it reset the political landscape of ancient Mexico for generations, proving that even a city that styled itself as the place where gods were born was not immune to the mortal forces of history. This deep dive into the legend of Babylon's Hanging Gardens reveals a mystery with not one, but several potential solutions, each more fascinating than the last. The most compelling alternative theory shifts the location hundreds of miles north to the ancient Assyrian capital of Nineveh and credits their construction not to Nebuchadnezzar, but to the ruthless and brilliant King Sennacherib, who ruled a century earlier. The archaeological evidence for this claim is startlingly robust. At his palace in Nineveh, known as the Palace Without a Rival, Sennacherib left behind detailed inscriptions boasting of his great garden. But this was no simple royal plot. The texts describe a monumental feat of engineering, a garden that was a wonder for all peoples. Most incredibly, he specifically mentions using a new innovation to water it, a bronze water-raising screw, an apparatus identical to the later Archimedes screw, which he claims was used to lift water to great heights. This is a direct parallel to the classical descriptions of the Hanging Gardens irrigation system. Even more convincing than the text is the physical evidence that still exists in the landscape around ancient Nineveh near modern-day Mosul. Sennacherib was a hydrological genius on an epic scale. To bring water to his capital, he didn't just dig a few canals, he orchestrated one of the most ambitious water projects of the ancient world. His engineers built a massive system of canals stretching over 50 miles to divert water from the mountains into the city. The crown jewel of this network was the Gerwan Aqueduct, a structure so advanced it feels anachronistic. Built around 690 BCE, it was constructed with over 2 million stone blocks and featured a precise, elevated stone channel that carried water across a valley. Its stonework even bears an inscription proudly crediting Sennacherib with its construction. This aqueduct system proves the Assyrians possessed the precise technological capability, the knowledge of canals, sluices, screws, and elevated waterways that was always thought necessary to create the Hanging Gardens. At Nineveh, we have a king who had the means, the motive, and the ego to build such a wonder, and who literally wrote about doing it. So how did the gardens, if they were in Nineveh, become associated with Babylon? The answer likely lies in the fog of war, conquest, and the passage of centuries. The Babylonian and Assyrian empires were bitter rivals, and the Babylonians eventually destroyed Nineveh in 612 BCE. When the Greek historian Herodotus traveled through the region 2 centuries later, the glory of Assyria was a forgotten memory, its cities already ancient ruins. Babylon, however, was still a magnificent and active city under Persian rule, its grandeur widely known and celebrated. It is entirely plausible that Greek travelers, hearing magnificent tales of a spectacular garden from local guides, simply attached the story to the more famous and still standing city of Babylon. The two cultures, Assyrian and Babylonian, were often conflated by later classical writers who saw them both as part of the exotic, ancient East. The story of a powerful king building a garden for his queen was a timeless and romantic tale that easily could have drifted from one great city to the other over the centuries, its true origins blurred by time. This theory of mistaken identity doesn't require any deception. It simply acknowledges how history and legend naturally intertwine. The story of the gardens would have been a captivating piece of local lore passed down through generations. When Greek scholars like Berossus, a Babylonian priest writing for a Greek audience, compiled these histories, they were working with oral traditions and fragments of records that were already centuries old. In their effort to present the wonders of Mesopotamia to the Greek world, the most spectacular stories may have been consolidated onto the most famous location, creating a cleaner, more impressive narrative. Babylon's name recognition and its status as one of the 7 wonders home for the Ishtar Gate and walls simply made it the perfect setting for the most fantastic garden story. Ultimately, the persistent power of the Hanging Gardens legend, regardless of its physical reality, speaks to a deeper human truth. It fulfilled a powerful archetype in the classical imagination, the ultimate symbol of Oriental luxury and the boundless power of a king. To a Greek or Roman, the idea of a monarch so powerful he could defy nature itself, building a lush, watered mountain in the middle of a desert, was the perfect expression of Eastern despotism and opulence. It was a story that confirmed their worldview and captured their sense of wonder. The garden became a literary trope, a mythical ideal that was more appealing than any possible reality. Whether it was built in Nineveh, Babylon, or only in the minds of poets, the Hanging Gardens endure because they represent something eternal. Humanity's dream of conquering the harshness of nature to create a perfect, enclosed paradise, a testament to love, power, and the endless desire to make the impossible real. For decades after its recovery from the shipwreck, the Antikythera Mechanism remained one of archaeology's most perplexing puzzles, a corroded lump of bronze that hinted at impossible complexity. The real breakthrough in unraveling its secrets didn't come from traditional archaeology, but from the dawn of the digital age. The true revolution began when a collaborative team of scientists, led by figures like Mike Edmonds and Tony Freeth, turned the power of advanced medical technology onto this 2,000-year-old artifact. They used high-resolution X-ray tomography, the same technology used for detailed 3D imaging of the human body, to perform a virtual autopsy on the mechanism's corroded interior. This process allowed them to peer through the layers of calcite and mineralized bronze without ever physically touching the fragile fragments, mapping the intricate gear trains in 3 dimensions for the very first time. What these scans revealed was a mechanical universe of breathtaking complexity. They could see that the 30 known gears were precisely cut from a single sheet of bronze, with triangular teeth hand-filed to an accuracy that would challenge a modern machinist. The scans mapped the relationship between these gears, showing how a single input crank on the side of the device drove a symphony of interlocking wheels, each turning at different rates to model the erratic motions of the heavens. One of the most brilliant discoveries was a pin and slot mechanism within a gear that perfectly mimicked the Moon's variable speed as it travels along its elliptical orbit, a feature of celestial mechanics that wasn't formally described until the 17th century by Johannes Kepler. This wasn't just a simple calculator, it was a dynamic, analog model of the cosmos, a clockwork universe running on a hand crank, but the gears only told half the story. The true user manual for this ancient computer was inscribed on its bronze casing and on the faces of its dials. Over centuries, these inscriptions had faded and become hidden within the folded, corroded fragments. Using a technique called polynomial texture mapping, or reflectance transformation imaging, researchers were able to photograph the surfaces from multiple angles and use software to highlight the faintest scratches and indentations, effectively making the invisible visible. This painstaking process allowed them to read thousands of new characters of text, a manual that explained what the machine was displaying and how to interpret its predictions. These weren't just labels, they were detailed descriptions of planetary phenomena and elaborate instructions for reading the cosmos. Deciphering these inscriptions confirmed the mechanism's most sophisticated functions. The front dial featured a complex arrangement of concentric rings. One ring showed the 365-day Egyptian calendar, while another displayed the 12 signs of the Greek zodiac. A movable ball, half white and half black, rotated to show the phase of the Moon on any given date. Most astonishingly, pointers for the 5 known planets Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn moved across this dial, accurately showing their positions relative to the Earth and the zodiac. This alone was a computational nightmare for the ancients, as these planets appear to slow down, stop, and reverse direction in the sky, a phenomenon known as retrograde motion. The mechanism perfectly modeled these apparent reversals using its intricate gear trains, something no other device could do until the great cathedral clocks of the medieval period. On the back of the device, 2 large spiral dials acted as the mechanism's long-term memory. The upper spiral, the metonic dial, tracked the 19-year metonic cycle, which harmonizes solar years with lunar months and was crucial for creating accurate calendars. The lower spiral, the Saros dial, was used for predicting eclipses. This was not just a simple warning system. The inscriptions around this dial included details about the time, duration, and even the color and direction of the expected eclipse, factors that ancient astrologers believed could tell you if an eclipse was a good or bad omen. Perhaps the most human and charming detail was a small subsidiary dial that tracked the 4-year cycle of the Panhellenic Games, including the Olympic Games. This transformed the mechanism from a purely scientific instrument into a cultural calendar, reminding the user when the great athletic contests would next be held, an event that brought the entire Greek world to a temporary truce. The collective weight of this evidence points to a single, staggering conclusion. The Antikythera Mechanism was not a unique miracle. it represents the pinnacle of a lost tradition of high technology in the Hellenistic world. The knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, and precision engineering required to design and build it suggests a workshop of master craftsmen working from a body of sophisticated texts that have been completely lost to history. This device proves that the ancient Greeks had moved far beyond philosophical speculation about the cosmos. They were building precise mechanical models to simulate its behavior. The fact that this technology then vanished for over 1,000 years, only to be reinvented in Europe during the 14th century, is one of history's greatest intellectual tragedies. Its discovery forces us to completely rewrite the history of technology, painting a picture of an ancient world that was far more mechanically advanced and intellectually curious than we ever dared imagine. A brilliant light that shone brightly and was then snuffed out for centuries, waiting on the seafloor for the right technology to finally tell its story. To truly grasp the profound significance of the Longmen Grottos, we must journey back to the vibrant cultural currents of the Silk Road. This was not merely a trade route for silk and spices. It was the ancient world's greatest information superhighway, a conduit for ideas, languages, and faiths flowing between East and West. Buddhism began its journey from the monasteries of India, traveling through the bustling caravan stops of Central Asia, carried by monks, merchants, and missionaries. By the time it reached China, it encountered a civilization with its own deeply rooted philosophical traditions, like Confucianism and Taoism. The cave temple, a format perfected in Indian sites like Ajanta, was the perfect vehicle for this new faith. It provided a permanent, awe-inspiring sanctuary for worship and meditation, far from the distractions of the secular world. The act of carving a temple from a cliff face was seen as an immense act of merit, a way for a patron to accumulate spiritual capital and publicly demonstrate their piety and power. The limestone cliffs lining the river presented an ideal canvas, durable yet workable, and situated near the ancient capital of Luoyang, making it the perfect stage for emperors to showcase their devotion and control. This 5-century-long project reveals a fascinating evolution in artistic style, each dynasty leaving its own distinct ideological and aesthetic imprint on the stone. The earliest caves, commissioned by the Northern Wai after they moved their capital to Luoyang, reflect a foreign elegance. The Buddha figures are slender and ethereal, with enigmatic, almond-shaped eyes and flowing robes that cascade in abstract linear patterns. This style, influenced by Gupta art from India, emphasizes the Buddha's transcendent, otherworldly nature, a being who has moved beyond the cares of the physical realm. However, following a period of anti-Buddhist persecution, the style that re-emerged under the Tang dynasty is dramatically different. This was the golden age of Chinese Buddhism, and the art reflects a new confidence and assimilation. The figures become robust, solid, and powerfully humanistic. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have full, rounded faces with expressions of serene compassion, their bodies depicted with a subtle understanding of anatomy beneath their sculpted robes. This shift from the abstract to the humanistic mirrors Buddhism's journey from a foreign import to a fully Sinicized religion, one that now felt familiar and accessible to the Chinese people, embodying the Tang ideal of harmony and worldly prosperity. The creation of the grottos was also a deeply political act, a way for rulers to legitimize their authority through divine association. When the Northern Wai, a dynasty of Chuoba nomads, conquered northern China, they used Buddhism and its art to unify their diverse subjects and present themselves as civilized, universal monarchs. The colossal Vairocana Buddha in the Fengxian Temple Cave, funded by Empress Wu Zetian, is the ultimate expression of this. As the only woman to ever rule China as emperor, her position was constantly challenged. By financing the largest, most magnificent statue at Longmen, whose face was said to be modeled on her own, she was making an undeniable claim. She was visually equating herself with the cosmic, all-encompassing Buddha, presenting her rule not as a usurpation but as a manifestation of divine will. The grottos were a very public billboard for imperial power, demonstrating the dynasty's wealth, organizational capability, and divine mandate to anyone who visited, from high-ranking officials to humble pilgrims. Surviving for over 15 centuries required enduring not just the slow erosion of time, but the violent upheavals of human history. The Longmen grottos faced repeated periods of religious persecution, most notably the great anti-Buddhist persecution under Emperor Wuzong in the 840s. Temples were destroyed, monasteries disbanded, and countless metal statues were melted down for coin. While the stone figures of Longmen could not be so easily looted, many were still defaced during this era. Later, during the early 20th century, the site suffered tremendously from the hands of foreign collectors and looters. The thirst for Asian art in Western museums led to a rampant illicit trade, with entire heads and relief panels being brutally sawn off and smuggled out of the country. You can still see the scars of this vandalism today, ghostly, empty niches where statues once stood and headless figures that bear silent witness to this chapter of plunder. Despite this, the intrinsic strength of the stone and its remote cliffside location provided a degree of protection that more vulnerable wooden temples did not enjoy. The same limestone that was soft enough for craftsmen to carve also possessed a durability that allowed it to withstand centuries of weathering, even as the paint on its surface flaked away. The turning point for its preservation came in 1961, when the Chinese government designated Longmen as one of the nation's first protected cultural heritage sites, leading to increased security and conservation efforts. The ultimate recognition of its universal value to humanity came in 2000, when UNESCO inscribed the Longmen grottos on the World Heritage List. This status acknowledges the site as a masterpiece of human creative genius and provides a framework for its ongoing preservation, ensuring that this symphony in stone, with all its historical layers and artistic grandeur, will continue to inspire awe and reverence for generations to come. Perhaps the most radical and inspiring aspect of Carol is what archaeologists have not found. In a world where we assume ancient history is written in fortifications and arsenals, Carol is a silent, powerful rebuttal. After decades of excavation, there is a complete and stunning absence of any evidence for warfare. Not a single defensive wall has been unearthed. There are no moats, no stockpiles of weapons, no depictions of conquered enemies or bound prisoners on their artwork. This wasn't a society living in a state of paranoid siege. It was a civilization that seemingly organized itself without a permanent enemy. This profound lack of defensive infrastructure suggests a social model built on cooperation and integration rather than subjugation and fear. The different residential sectors show variations in wealth and status, but not the extreme, fortified inequality of a palace versus a slum. This points toward a more collective form of governance, perhaps led by a class of priest astronomers who wielded authority through their perceived ability to intercede with the gods and predict the celestial cycles that dictated the agricultural and ritual calendar, rather than through military might. This peaceful character is beautifully underscored by the artifacts they left behind, which tell a story of a society deeply invested in culture and community. Among the most captivating finds are the musical instruments, 32 flutes made from the bones of pelicans and condors, and 37 cornets crafted from the bones of llamas and deer. These weren't crude noisemakers, they were expertly crafted, often intricately decorated with intricate carvings of monkeys, birds, and other figures. The very existence of these instruments in such numbers suggests that music was not a casual pastime but a central pillar of Carol's social and ceremonial life. Imagine the soundscape of this ancient city, the haunting melodies of these bone flutes echoing across the plazas during rituals, the deep, resonant call of the cornets signaling the start of a communal gathering or a religious festival. This was a society that channeled its collective energy into creating harmony, both social and musical, using art to bind the community together in a shared spiritual experience. Their intellectual pursuits extended from the artistic directly into the celestial. The people of Caral were keen observers of the heavens, and they encoded their sophisticated understanding of astronomy directly into their architecture. The entire city was meticulously aligned with the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. The main monumental structures are positioned to mark key astronomical events, particularly the solstices and equinoxes. A prominent circular sunken court, or huacha, is aligned so that on the winter solstice, the sun's rays would strike a specific point within it, signaling the turning of the year and the gradual return of the sun. This precise celestial alignment served a deeply practical purpose. It provided an accurate agricultural calendar, telling them exactly when to plant and when to harvest in their challenging desert environment. But it also connected them to the cosmos, embedding their spiritual beliefs into the very fabric of their city and reinforcing the authority of the astronomer priests who could read these heavenly signs. When we piece together this evidence, the lack of walls, the prevalence of musical instruments, the astronomical alignments, Caral forces a dramatic re-evaluation of how civilization itself can emerge. The standard model for the rise of the state, often called the "where there's a will, there's a war" theory, posits that complex society required a ruling class to emerge from chronic warfare, organizing people for defense and conquest. Caral presents a powerful alternative, the "where there's a worship, there's a way" model. Here, it seems the driving force was not conflict, but a collective spiritual and cultural project. The impulse to come together to build monumental temples, to make music for the gods, and to accurately track the heavens provided the necessary motivation for social complexity. This suggests that under the right conditions, humanity can choose cooperation over conflict, and that our earliest experiments in large-scale living could be founded on shared belief and intellectual curiosity rather than fear and coercion. Caral stands as a haunting, beautiful question mark against our assumptions, offering a glimpse of a road not taken, a potential history where the first cities were built not for kings and soldiers, but for priests, astronomers, and musicians. From the colossal, sun-baked stones of Great Zimbabwe to the impossibly intricate bronze gears of the Antikythera Mechanism, our journey through these 30 wonders reveals a truth far more astonishing than any single legend. The ancient world was a global tapestry of genius, woven with countless threads of innovation, faith, and ambition. We've stood in the echoing oracle chambers of the Hal-Saflieni Hypogeum, where sound itself was sculpted into a tool for transcendence, and walked the vast, master-planned avenues of Teotihuacan, a metropolis that thrived for centuries without a single boastful king. We've seen how hunter-gatherers at Göbekli Tepe might have built a temple that sparked the agricultural revolution, and how the peaceful musicians of Caral forged a civilization without a single fortification. Each site is a unique fingerprint of human potential, a powerful reminder that brilliance is not the birthright of any one culture or continent, but a spark that has flared up again and again across time and terrain, wherever people have dared to dream on a monumental scale. These marvels do more than just fill in the blanks of our history books. They actively challenge its very foundations. They force us to abandon simplistic timelines and dismissive stereotypes about so-called primitive peoples. The Nazca lines were not alien landing strips, but a sophisticated astronomical calendar and a profound prayer for water, etched into the desert with breathtaking precision. The Library of Celsus was not merely a repository of scrolls, but a bold political statement and a beacon of cross-cultural knowledge, merging Roman power with Greek philosophy. The Derinkuyu underground city showcases a terrifyingly practical ingenuity for survival, while the Sun Temple of Konark represents a breathtaking leap of artistic and spiritual symbolism, turning architecture into a celestial poem. Every one of these sites pushes the boundaries of what we thought was possible, compelling us to constantly re-evaluate the capabilities, motivations, and profound inner lives of our ancestors. Ultimately, the greatest wonder is the enduring human spirit. These structures represent the relentless drive to create meaning, to connect with the divine, to push the limits of engineering, and to leave a mark that whispers across millennia, "We were here." They are a testament to our shared heritage of curiosity and wonder. So now we turn the conversation over to you. Which of these forgotten wonders most captured your imagination? Was it the silent, stoic army of Qin Shi Huang waiting eternally for a command that never came? Or the lost hydrological magic that might have fed the legendary Hanging Gardens? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love reading your perspectives and diving into these discussions with you. If you enjoyed this journey beyond the traditional 7, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the world's greatest historical mysteries. The past is vast, and we've only just begun to uncover its secrets.